What if Harry Potter was adopted by Madara Uchiha? Hello guys, welcome to Soul Fiction. So in this video, we will see, what if Harry Potter was adopted by Madara Uchiha? If you enjoy these kinds of stories, don't forget to show us some love by hitting the like button and subscribing to the channel. Your support means the world to us. Now, let's start the story. Chapter 1. The cupboard and the god. The dimensional tear spat Madara Uchiha onto wet asphalt like the universe itself was trying to get rid of him. That he hit the ground rolling, instincts taking over before conscious thought caught up, and came up in a crouch with kunai already drawn. Rain hammered down on him. Street lights buzzed overhead, casting everything in sickly orange. Cars, he recognized them from Kagaya's dimensional glimpses, primitive chakra-less vehicles, sat motionless in driveways. Identical houses stretched in both directions, so perfectly similar they seemed designed to crush the soul. TCH. Madara straightened slowly, letting the kunai disappear back into his sleeve. His Rinnegan throbbed with residual dimensional energy, and his regular Sharingan was already cataloging everything: no threats, no chakra signatures worth mentioning, no immediate danger. Just, suburbia. Endless, mind-numbing suburbia. He was supposed to be dead. Again. The brat, Naruto, had done something impossible during their final clash. Madara had felt reality bend, felt himself being torn from the fabric of his own dimension, and then, here. Wherever here was. A world without chakra. Or rather, a world where chakra existed but felt wrong, twisted into something unrecognizable. Madara could sense it in the air like background radiation, faint and corrupted. Magic, perhaps. He'd heard theories about such places existing in the spaces between dimensions. None of that mattered right now. What mattered was shelter, information, and determining whether this exile was permanent or temporary. Madara started walking. He'd been wandering for perhaps 20 minutes, rain soaking through his battle-damaged armor, when he felt it. A chakra signature. Tiny. Flickering. So weak it was nearly indistinguishable from the ambient magical corruption. But it was there, a small sun trying desperately to shine through layers of suffocating darkness, and it was screaming, not audibly. The street remained quiet except for the rain. But to Madara's senses, honed over decades of war and betrayal, that signature was broadcasting agony on a frequency most would never detect. It reminded him of Izuna in those final days, chakra guttering like a candle in a hurricane, body giving up even as spirit refused to surrender. Madara's feet changed direction without conscious input. He found the source 3 streets over, number 4, Privet Drive. A house so aggressively normal it circled back around to suspicious. Perfect lawn despite the late hour and heavy rain. Perfect hedges. Perfect car in the perfect driveway. The kind of perfection that only existed when someone was desperately hiding something. The chakra signature came from inside. Ground floor. Below ground floor, actually, some kind of basement or storage space beneath the stairs. Madara considered his options. He was weakened from the dimensional transit, his chakra reserve sitting at perhaps 30%. He was in an unknown world with unknown rules. The intelligent play was reconnaissance, patience, gathering information before acting. The signature flickered again. Weaker this time. Damn, Madara muttered, and walked up to the front door. He didn't knock. Knocking was for people who accepted that doors could stop them. The lock disintegrated under a precise application of chakra, and Madara stepped inside number 4, Privet Drive like he owned the place. The entrance hall was dark. Photographs lined the walls, a pig-like boy at various ages, always the center of attention. A horse-faced woman with too much neck. A walrus of a man with no neck at all. Happy, smiling, normal. No photographs of anyone else. No indication that any other child lived here, but that signature was close now. Right there, under the stairs, behind a small door with multiple locks on the outside. Locks to keep something in. Madara's jaw tightened. He'd seen a lot of evil in his long life. He'd committed quite a bit of it himself, if he was being honest. War did that, stripped away pretenses and revealed what people were truly capable of. But there was something about cruelty to children that reached past his carefully constructed nihilism and touched something older. Something that remembered being a child himself in an era when children were soldiers and soldiers were expendable. The locks came off with a gesture. The door swung open. The cupboard under the stairs was perhaps 4 feet wide and 6 feet deep. Cleaning supplies had been shoved to the sides to make room for a thin, stained mattress on the floor. No pillow. A single threadbare blanket that might have been blue once. Crayon drawings on the walls, crude but desperate attempts at color in this tiny prison, and on the mattress, curled into a ball so tight it seemed like he was trying to disappear into himself, was a boy that he couldn't have been more than 7. Maybe 8, hard to tell with how small he was, how clearly malnourished. Black hair matted with grime. Oversized clothes that might have fit the pig boy in the photographs but hung off this child like a tent. Bruises visible even in the darkness, yellowing around the edges but fresh enough to still hurt. The boy's eyes were open. Green. Startlingly, impossibly green, like someone had captured killing curse light and put it in a child's face. They stared at Madara with absolutely no fear. That was wrong. That was very, very wrong. A child this abused should flinch, should cower, should show some survival instinct. This boy just watched. Waited. Like he'd already accepted whatever came next. Ichem. Madara crouched down, bringing himself closer to eye level. The movement made the boy track him, but still no flinch. You are not afraid. It wasn't a question, but the boy answered anyway. His voice was hoarse, barely above a whisper. Doesn't matter if I'm scared. You'll do what you want anyway. Madara felt something crack in his chest. A small thing. A thing he'd thought long dead. What is your name? Freak. The boy said it without inflection, like he was reporting the weather. Or boy. Sometimes they call me Harry but only when other people are around. Harry. Madara tasted the name. It felt too soft for this hard little creature. And they? He gestured vaguely upward, toward the bedrooms where he could now hear the pig boy snoring. They are your family. My aunt and uncle. And Dudley. My parents died when I was a baby. Still no emotion. Just facts. Mom and Dad were drunks who died in a car crash. I'm supposed to be grateful they took me in. Lies. The story reeked of lies, too practiced, too neat, too convenient. And more importantly, Madara could feel it now that he was close. This child had power. Not chakra, not exactly, but something adjacent. Raw, untrained, vast and roiling beneath the surface like a volcano waiting to erupt. No drunk's child had this kind of potential. No accident survivor had eyes that glowed faintly with residual energy. Someone had hidden this boy here. Someone had wanted him weak, broken, controllable. Someone had made a terrible mistake. Can you stand? Madara asked. Harry blinked, the first sign of confusion he'd shown. What? Stand. Walk. Move under your own power. Can you do this? Yes. But, then stand. It wasn't a request. Harry seemed to recognize that, because he uncurled slowly, painfully, joints popping in ways that made Madara revise his injury estimate upward significantly. The boy had been beaten recently. Within the last few days, probably. Had been denied food even longer than that, based on how his hands shook that he stood anyway. Swayed but didn't fall. Those green eyes fixed on Madara with something almost like defiance. Good. Madara allowed himself a small nod. You will come with me. Why? Because this place will be ash within the hour, and you should not be inside when that happens. Harry processed this information. A normal child would have screamed, cried, demanded explanations. This child just looked at the crayon drawings on his cupboard walls, then back at Madara, and said, Can you wait 5 minutes? There's something I need to get. The something turned out to be a photograph. Just one, hidden beneath a loose floorboard that Harry had apparently pried up himself using nothing but his fingernails. A photograph of a man and woman holding a baby, the man with Harry's messy black hair, the woman with Harry's green eyes, both looking at the infant like he was their entire world. "They said I didn't have any pictures," Harry whispered. "Found this in the attic when they made me clean it. They don't know I have it." Madara looked at the photograph. The woman's red hair caught his attention. Red hair and green eyes. In his world, that would have marked her as Uzumaki, a clan known for vast chakra reserves and unusual abilities. In this world, it probably meant something similar. "Your mother," he said. "She was powerful." Harry's grip on the photograph tightened. "Everyone says she was worthless. A drunk. Everyone is lying." Madara cut him off without malice. "Simply stating fact. I can sense power, child. Yours is vast. Poorly developed, suppressed, but vast nonetheless. This does not come from nowhere. Your mother, your father, they were something more than what you've been told." For the first time, something flickered in Harry's dead green eyes. Hope, maybe. Or just the desperate need to believe that the photo wasn't a lie, that somewhere out there he'd been wanted. "How do you know?" "Because I am Madara Uchiha." He said it like it should mean something, and was mildly annoyed when it clearly didn't. "I have lived longer than most nations. I have fought gods and reshaped reality. I know power when I see it, and I see it in you." Harry looked at him, really looked, and whatever he saw made him nod slowly. Okay. I don't know if you're crazy or telling the truth, but you're the first person who's ever wanted to take me away from here, so, okay. I'll come with you." Madara almost smiled. "Almost. You have no survival instincts. Survival would mean I had something to live for." Harry tucked the photograph inside his oversized shirt, pressing it against his chest. "I didn't. Maybe I do now. Can we go?" They were almost to the front door when the lights clicked on. Vernon Desley stood at the top of the stairs in a nightshirt that did absolutely nothing to contain his massive form. His face had already begun turning purple, small eyes fixed on Harry with the particular hatred of a coward confronting something that frightened him. "Boy." The word came out as a bellow. "What do you think you're doing out of your cupboard? And who the hell is this?" "Petunia. Petunia. There's an intruder. Call the police." Madara sighed that he'd intended to simply leave. Burn the house down from a distance, perhaps, once Harry was safe. Make it look like an accident. Minimize complications in this new world until he understood the rules. But Vernon Desley was already waddling down the stairs, face contorted with rage, meaty fist raised as if he intended to strike Harry right there in the entrance hall. And something about that, about the casual assumption that he could hurt this child without consequence, that he had the right, made Madara's plans change. "You will stop," Madara said quietly. Vernon did not stop. "Listen here, you foreign vagrant, I don't know what you think you're doing in my house, but I'll have you know I'm a respected member of this community. Grunning's finest employee. You can't just break in and..." Madara's hand closed around Vernon's throat that he hadn't visibly moved. One moment he was by the door, the next he was on the stairs, lifting a man who weighed at least 300 pounds with one arm like he was picking up a disagreeable cat. Vernon's words turned to gurgles. His feet kicked uselessly, inches off the ground. His eyes bulged, finally showing the fear that should have been there from the beginning. "I was going to leave," Madara said conversationally. "Take the boy and disappear. Allow you to live in your perfect normal house with your perfect normal family. A kindness you did not deserve, but one I was willing to extend." Petunia appeared at the top of the stairs, screaming. Dudley poked his head out of his bedroom door, saw what was happening, and promptly wet himself. Madara ignored them both. His Sharingan spun lazily, casting red light across Vernon's purpling face. "But you raised your hand. You raised your hand to a child," in my presence, without hesitation. As if it were your right. His grip tightened. What else have you done, I wonder? What have you convinced yourself was acceptable? Please, Vernon wheezed. I am not interested in your pleas. Madara released him, and Vernon crumpled to the stairs, gasping. I am interested in your confession. You will tell me everything you have done to this child. Every beating. Every meal denied. Every cruelty, large and small. You will hold nothing back. And then, his Sharingan spun faster, you will never speak of him again. Genjutsu was such a useful tool. Vernon's eyes glazed over, caught in a hypnotic pattern, and he began to talk. Harry listened from the entrance hall, face unreadable. With every word out of Vernon's mouth, the cupboard since he was 18 months old, the beatings when he asked about his parents, the starvation as punishment for accidental magic, the burning of his Hogwarts letters, the isolation and degradation and systematic destruction of a child's soul, something in Harry's eyes went darker. Colder, Madara watched that transformation with clinical interest. The boy wasn't breaking. He was calcifying. Turning the knowledge of what had been done to him into armor rather than wounds. Good. He would need that armor. Vernon finished speaking. The litany of abuse had taken nearly 10 minutes. Petunia had fainted somewhere around the part about the belt, and Dudley had retreated into his room to cry. Throughout it all, Vernon had spoken in a dreamy monotone, completely unaware of what he was confessing. Is there anything else? Madara asked. The letters, Vernon said dully. More kept coming. From a school. Wanted the boy. We burned them all. Dumbledore came himself, once. Made us promise to keep the freak, the boy, safe. Said it was important. Said there was protection in the blood. Dumbledore. Madara filed that name away. Someone with authority. Someone who had placed Harry here deliberately. And this. Dumbledore. He knew how you treated the boy. Must have. Vernon's head lolled. Magic. Watches everything. Old man said the boy had to stay. Said his aunt's blood made it safe. Didn't care about anything else. Just said keep him alive. We kept him alive. Barely, Madara murmured. He looked at Harry. Did you know that someone placed you here on purpose? Harry's jaw was tight. No. I thought nobody wanted me. That's what they always said. Nobody wanted me, nobody was coming, I should be grateful for scraps. And now you know the truth. Now I know. Harry's hands had curled into fists. The air around him was starting to shimmer, raw magic responding to raw emotion. Someone put me here. Someone knew what they were doing and left me anyway. Yes. Someone is going to pay for that. Madara smiled. It wasn't a nice smile. Yes. But not today. Today, we leave. Today, you begin again. He gestured toward the door. Go outside. Wait by the street. I will join you shortly. Harry looked at Vernon, still slumped on the stairs in his genjutsu-induced stupor. What are you going to do? Nothing you need to see. I want to see. No. Madara's voice left no room for argument. Vengeance is a tool, child. Used improperly, it becomes a chain. You are angry, good. You should be angry. But you do not need to watch what comes next. Your hands will be bloody enough soon without adding this to them. Harry held his gaze for a long moment. Then, slowly, he nodded and walked out the front door. Madara waited until he heard the boy's footsteps fade. Then he turned back to the Dursleys. Wake, he commanded, and the genjutsu lifted. Vernon sucked in air like a drowning man, eyes wild. What did you? I gave you a chance to confess your sins. Madara ascended the stairs slowly, and Vernon scrambled backward, tripping over his own feet. Most men never receive such a gift. You should be grateful. Stay away from me. Petunia. Petunia. Petunia wasn't waking up. Madara had made sure of that. She would wake in the morning, alone, with only fragmented memories of this night and a burning house around her. She was complicit in Harry's abuse, yes, but she was also a victim of her own fear and her husband's cruelty. Madara had seen the way she flinched when Vernon raised his voice. She would live, not because she deserved mercy, but because killing her would require Harry to be an orphan twice over, and the boy didn't need that particular weight, Vernon, though. Vernon was the architect. Vernon was the fist, the voice, the embodiment of every cruelty. Vernon would burn. Do you know what I find most contemptible about men like you? Madara asked, still approaching, still unhurried. Vernon had backed himself into a corner now, whimpering like the animal he was. It isn't the cruelty itself. I have been cruel. I have killed thousands. I do not pretend to be righteous. He crouched down, bringing his face close to Vernon's. The Sharingan spun. It's the weakness. You hurt children because children cannot fight back. You scream and threaten because you know no one will call you to account. You are a coward who mistakes cruelty for strength. He straightened. I will show you what real strength looks like. Vernon opened his mouth to scream. Madara didn't give him the chance. The fire started in the kitchen. A gas leak, tragic but hardly unusual. It spread quickly, too quickly to contain, leaping from room to room with almost supernatural hunger. By the time the neighbors woke and called emergency services, number 4 Privet Drive was fully engulfed. They found one body in the wreckage. Male. Large. Identified through dental records as Vernon Dursley. His wife, Petunia, had escaped somehow, found wandering 3 streets over in her nightgown, unable to explain how she'd gotten out. Shock, the paramedic said. Trauma. She couldn't remember anything about the fire itself. She was similarly unable to explain where her nephew had gone. When asked about Harry Potter, she simply stared blankly and said she didn't know anyone by that name. The same response every time, no matter who asked or how they phrased the question. The boy called Dudley Dursley had also escaped, though he'd been found in a different location, curled up in a neighbor's garden shed, rocking back and forth and mumbling about red eyes. He would spend the next 3 months in a psychiatric facility, being treated for acute trauma response. He would never fully recover. No third child's body was found in the ashes. No Harry Potter. The police searched, but there was simply no evidence that anyone else had lived in the house. No photographs. No records. No second bed, no second place setting, nothing to suggest the existence of a boy who had vanished. The case would remain open for years. Missing person, Harry James Potter. Last known residence, number 4, Privet Drive. Last seen, unknown. Presumed dead, presumed wrong. 3 miles away, in a small patch of woodland that separated Little Whinging from the next town over, Harry Potter sat on a fallen log and watched the distant glow of fire paint the sky orange. Madara stood beside him, silent, letting the boy process. I should feel something, Harry said eventually. His voice was steady. Too steady for a child his age. Shouldn't I? They're dead. Or dying. I should feel. I don't know. Sad. Happy. Something. Should you? Madara settled onto the log beside him, leaving a careful distance between them. They were your tormentors. They made your life misery for 7 years. Their deaths mean your suffering ends. What should you feel? I don't know. Harry pulled the photograph from his shirt, looking at his parents' smiling faces. I keep waiting for the guilt to hit. Like any second I'm going to start crying or screaming or something. But I just feel. He struggled for the word. Empty, Madara supplied. Yeah. Empty. That is normal. Madara leaned back, looking up at the light-polluted sky. So few stars visible here. When you have been hurt for long enough, your heart builds walls. Thick ones. They keep the pain out, but they also keep everything else out. Happiness. Grief. Connection. All of it, locked away behind stone. Harry looked at him. Does it get better? That depends on you. Madara met his eyes. The walls can come down. Slowly. With time and trust and the understanding that not everyone will hurt you. Or they can stay up forever, and you can become something cold and hard and untouchable. He paused. I chose the second path. For a very long time, I chose it. I do not recommend it. But you're here now. With me. Yes. Madara wasn't entirely sure why that was true, but it was. Perhaps I am tired of being cold. They sat in silence for a while. The fire continued to burn in the distance. Sirens wailed, growing closer. What happens now? Harry asked. Now. Madara stood, brushing off his battle-damaged armor. Now we disappear. I need to understand this world, its rules, its powers, its factions. You need to grow stronger. We will find somewhere safe, somewhere hidden, and I will teach you. Teach me what? Madara's smile was sharp enough to cut glass. Everything. Finding somewhere safe turned out to be more complicated than Madara had anticipated. This world ran on money, and Madara had none. It ran on identification papers and documentation, and Madara existed in no database. It ran on rules and systems designed to track every person from birth to death, and Madara was a ghost who had never been born. Fortunately, Madara had centuries of experience operating outside systems that didn't want him. They spent the first week moving constantly. Different towns each night. Abandoned buildings, empty vacation homes, once a surprisingly comfortable church basement. Harry adapted to the lifestyle with disturbing ease. He'd clearly never had much, so having little felt normal to him. Madara used those traveling days to gather information. Newspapers, overheard conversations, careful questions posed to bartenders and shopkeepers. He learned about the mundane world first: governments, economies, technology, the complex web of international relations that somehow hadn't collapsed into constant war. Fascinating, really. These people had developed weapons capable of destroying cities, and yet they'd only used them twice. Restraint was not a trait Madara associated with humanity. The magical world took longer to uncover. It hid itself well, woven into the gaps and shadows of mundane society. But Madara's senses were sharp, and Harry's presence acted like a divining rod. Wherever they went, small magical creatures seemed drawn to the boy. A bowtruckle that appeared on his shoulder in a forest. A Kneazle that followed them for 3 miles in Cornwall. Things that recognized Harry's power even if Harry himself didn't understand it. On the 8th day, Madara tracked down a wizard. The pub was called the Leaky Cauldron. Madara had been circling it for 2 days, watching the people who entered and exited. Some vanished entirely once they stepped through the door, an obvious dimensional pocket or space folding technique. Others emerged carrying packages wrapped in brown paper, speaking in hushed voices about ingredients and wands and ministry regulations. That he went in alone, leaving Harry hidden in a nearby alley with strict instructions not to move. The interior was dim and smoky, exactly the sort of establishment Madara would have expected from a hidden magical community. Old wood, older patrons, and a bartender who looked like he'd been polishing the same glass since the dawn of time. Madara took a seat at the bar. The bartender, Tom, according to the faded nameplate on his apron, gave him an uncertain look. Can I help you, sir? Don't think I've seen you in here before. You haven't. Madara let a small amount of killing intent leak into his presence, just enough to establish dominance without causing a scene. I am new to this country. New to this world, in some ways. I require information. Tom's uncertain look shifted to nervous. Information about what, exactly? Everything. Madara smiled, and it didn't reach his eyes. But we can start with something simple. Tell me about Harry Potter. The glass Tom had been polishing slipped from his fingers and shattered on the floor. Every conversation in the pub stopped. Heads turned. Eyes fixed on Madara with expressions ranging from shock to suspicion to something approaching religious awe. Harry Potter. Tom's voice had gone hoarse. You're asking about Harry Potter? The boy who lived. Madara filed that title away. Yes. What do you know about him? What does everyone know about him, you mean? A wizard 3 stools down had turned fully around, nearly falling off his seat in excitement. Harry Potter, the boy who defeated you-know-who. Saved us all, he did, when he was just a baby. The killing curse bounced right off him and destroyed the Dark Lord. Greatest hero in wizarding history. I see. Madara kept his voice neutral. And where is this hero now? The excitement dimmed somewhat. Well, that's the thing, isn't it? Nobody knows, exactly. Dumbledore placed him somewhere safe, after. With family, supposedly. Protected him from Death Eaters and the like. But nobody's seen him in years. Won't be at Hogwarts until he turns 11. Dumbledore. That name again. Tell me about him. The reverence that entered the assembled wizards' faces told Madara everything he needed to know. This Dumbledore was their leader, their symbol, their great protector. The kind of figure that inspired blind loyalty and carefully avoided questions, the kind of figure that placed children in abusive homes, for the greater good. Albus Dumbledore is the greatest wizard alive, Tom said, as if reciting scripture. Headmaster of Hogwarts. Defeater of Grindelwald. Chief Warlock of the Wizengamot. Supreme Mugwump of the International Confederation of Wizards. If anyone can keep Harry Potter safe, it's him. Madara stood, leaving a few coins on the counter. He'd pickpocket them from a wealthy-looking businessman earlier that week. Thank you for the information. He was almost to the door when a voice stopped him. Wait. The wizard who'd been so excited about Harry Potter had followed him, eyes narrowed with sudden suspicion. You never said why you're asking about the boy. Who are you, anyway? Ministry? Reporter? Madara turned. Let his Sharingan spin into visibility for just a moment, casting red light across the dim pub. Let his killing intent unfurl fully, pressing down on every person in the room like a physical weight. I am no one you need to remember, he said softly. And if you are wise, you will forget this conversation ever happened. Genjutsu was such a useful tool. By the time Madara stepped back into the Muggle world, every person in the leaky cauldron would have only hazy memories of a stranger asking vague questions. Nothing specific. Nothing that could be traced. Harry was waiting where Madara had left him, crouched behind a dumpster with his knees pulled to his chest. He looked up as Madara approached, those 2 old green eyes searching for danger. Did you find what you needed? Some of it. Madara offered his hand, and Harry took it, still hesitant, still not entirely trusting, but willing to try. You are famous, it seems. A hero. The savior of their entire world. Harry's nose wrinkled. I'm 7. You were 1. When you saved them. Apparently, a dark wizard tried to kill you, and his curse rebounded and destroyed him instead. That doesn't make any sense. No. Madara began walking, keeping Harry's hand in his. It doesn't. Which means there is more to the story. Secrets being kept. Power being hidden. He glanced down at the boy. Your power, most likely. Contained. Suppressed. They wanted their hero weak and controllable. Harry's grip tightened. Like my aunt and uncle. Different methods. Same goal. Madara's voice was grim. You were meant to be a symbol, child. A flag to be waved. Not a person. Not a power. Just a story that made them feel safe. And now? Now you are neither. Madara allowed himself a small, genuine smile. Now you are mine. And I do not raise symbols, Harry Potter. I raise weapons. Harry considered this. I don't even know how to fight. You will learn. What if I'm bad at it? Madara laughed, a short, sharp sound that clearly startled Harry. Then I will teach you until you are good at it. There is no failure, child. Only training that has not yet been completed. They walked in silence for a while. The sun was setting, painting the sky in shades of red and gold. Harry kept sneaking glances at Madara, questions clearly building behind his teeth. Just ask, Madara said eventually. Why? Harry blurted. Why are you doing any of this? You could have walked away. Left me there. You didn't know me. You don't owe me anything. So why? Madara didn't answer immediately. The question deserved more than a glib response, and he wasn't entirely sure of the answer himself. I had a brother, he said finally. Izuna. Younger than me. Weaker than me. The world tried to crush him from the moment he was born. He fought anyway. Made himself strong. Became someone worth following. He paused. He died. Protecting me. Gave me his eyes so I could see clearly when he no longer could. Harry was quiet. Then, I'm sorry. It was a long time ago. But the wound still ached, even after all these centuries. When I found you in that cupboard, I saw him. Saw what he might have become if no one had been there to help him. Saw a child being destroyed by inches, fighting to survive with nothing and no one on his side. He stopped walking. Crouched down to Harry's level. Met those impossible green eyes. I will not lie to you, child. I am not a good man. I have killed more people than you can imagine. I have betrayed allies and destroyed nations and tried to enslave the world because I thought I knew better than everyone else. There is darkness in me that will never fully wash clean. Harry didn't look away. Didn't flinch. Just listened. But I am also the strongest fighter you will ever meet. The most dangerous. The most skilled. I can teach you things no one else in this world can. I can make you powerful enough that no one will ever lock you in a cupboard again. No one will ever use you as a symbol or a sacrifice or a convenient tool. What do you want in return? That you try. That you learn. That you become everything you are capable of becoming, and not the broken thing they wanted you to be. Madara straightened. I want a legacy, Harry Potter. Someone to carry on what I know when I am finally gone. I am offering you the chance to be that person. But the choice is yours. Harry looked at him for a long moment. Looked at the photograph still clutched against his chest. Looked back at the distant glow on the horizon, where his old life had burned to ash. My name, he said slowly, isn't Harry Potter. Not anymore. That boy died in the fire. Madara raised an eyebrow. Oh. And what should I call you, then? Harry, no, not Harry, not anymore, smiled. It was a strange expression on his face, like muscles that had forgotten how to work. You said your brother's name was Izuna. You said your family name was Uchiha. He paused. Can I be that? An Uchiha? Something shifted in Madara's chest. That crack from the cupboard widened, letting in light he hadn't felt in centuries. You would take my name. You're the only person who's ever wanted me. The boy's voice was steady but his eyes were bright with something that might have been tears. That makes you more family than anyone I've ever known. So yeah. I want your name. If you'll give it to me. Madara was quiet for a long moment. When he spoke, his voice was rough. Then rise, Hadrian Uchiha. He placed a hand on the boy's shoulder. Rise, and leave Harry Potter behind. From this day forward, you are my heir. My student. He hesitated, then pushed through, my son. And I will teach you to burn so brightly that the whole world will have no choice but to see you. Hadrian straightened. Stood tall for the first time since Madara had found him. And when he looked up at the legendary shinobi who had just claimed him, there was no fear in his eyes, only fire. They found a place to settle 3 weeks later. It was a small cottage in the Scottish Highlands, abandoned decades ago and slowly being reclaimed by nature. Miles from the nearest neighbor. No electricity, no running water, no connection to the modern world whatsoever. Perfect. Madara spent the first month making it habitable. Not comfortable, comfort bred weakness, but habitable. A roof that didn't leak. Walls that blocked the wind. A fireplace that drew properly. Basic survival, nothing more. Hadrian watched him work, asking questions constantly. How did Madara know how to build things? Where had he learned to hunt? Why did he move like that, like every step was calculated? How did he make fire appear from nothing? Madara answered some questions and deflected others. The boy didn't need to know everything about his new father's past. Not yet. He needed foundation first, strength and skill and the confidence that came from knowing you could survive anything. The complicated truths could come later. Training began on day 1. Your body is weak, Madara announced that first morning, looking at Hadrian with clinical detachment. Malnutrition has stunted your growth. Your muscles are atrophied. Your bones are likely deficient. Before anything else, we must fix this. Hadrian, who had been expecting some kind of magical enlightenment, looked distinctly unimpressed. So we're not learning to shoot fire from our hands? Can you run a mile? I don't know. Maybe. Run. Now. I will tell you when to stop. Hadrian made it perhaps a quarter mile before collapsing. Madara appeared beside him, face expressionless. Again. I can't, again. By the end of that first day, Hadrian could barely walk. Every muscle screamed. His lungs felt like they were filled with glass. He'd vomited twice, and Madara had simply told him to aim away from the training area. It was the best day of his life, because Madara had been there the whole time. Pushing him, yes. Demanding more than Hadrian thought he could give. But there. Present. Invested. Caring enough to make Hadrian suffer now so he could thrive later. No one had ever cared enough to push him before. Days turned to weeks, turned to months. Hadrian grew, not just physically, though that happened too. Proper nutrition. Madara turned out to be a surprisingly good cook, having learned from necessity during decades of war, combined with constant exercise transformed the malnourished waif into something healthier. He was still small for his age, but there was muscle now beneath the skin. Endurance. Speed. His mind grew sharper too. Madara made him study everything, mathematics, languages, history, strategy, the basics of a dozen different disciplines. A warrior who cannot think is merely a weapon, Madara explained. Weapons are used and discarded. You will be a warrior who uses himself, who makes his own choices, who cannot be wielded by anyone's hand but his own. Hadrian devoured knowledge like he'd been starving for it. Which, in a sense, he had. The Desleys had actively discouraged any sign of intelligence, viewing it as a threat to their control. Now, finally free to learn, Hadrian discovered a voracious appetite for understanding, and then there was the chakra training. Your power is not chakra, Madara explained one evening, several months into their training. They sat by the fire, Hadrian exhausted from his daily exercises, Madara seemingly inexhaustible as always. It is something different. Related, perhaps, a distant cousin or a branch that diverged millennia ago. But different enough that my techniques will not work for you directly. Hadrian held up his hand, watching the faint shimmer of energy that sometimes appeared around his fingers when he concentrated. So I can't do what you do. Not as I do it, no. But, Madara leaned forward, the principles are the same. Energy flows through all living things. It can be shaped. Focused. Directed. The specific methods vary, but the fundamental truth remains: power is power. Learn to feel it, to understand it, to control it, and the techniques will follow. How do I start? Madara smiled. It was becoming a more common expression these days. Close your eyes. Breathe. And find the fire. The fire, as Hadrian came to understand it, was magic, not the flashy wand-waving that wizards apparently used in this world. Madara had nothing but contempt for such crutches, but the raw essence of magical power. It lived inside Hadrian like a second heartbeat, vast and turbulent and desperate to be released. The Dursley's abuse had suppressed it, forced it into ever smaller containers. The love that should have nurtured it had been replaced by fear and pain, twisting the natural flow into knots. Hadrian's accidental magic, the times he'd made things move or appeared places he shouldn't have been, were pressure releases, moments when the container cracked and power spilled out. Madara taught him to open the container deliberately. It was dangerous work. Wild magic was exactly that, wild. Unpredictable. Capable of lashing out in ways that could hurt Hadrian as easily as help him. The first time Hadrian successfully called fire to his hand, he also set his entire right arm ablaze. Only Madara's quick reflexes, water summoned from thin air, saved him from serious injury, but they kept working. Day after day, failure after failure, small success building on small success. Hadrian learned to feel the fire without being consumed. To direct it without losing control. To shape it, slowly, carefully, into something he could use. 6 months in, he could reliably light candles from across the room. A year in, he could throw fireballs that actually went where he aimed them. 18 months in, Madara pronounced him marginally competent in basic elemental manipulation, which Hadrian had learned was the closest thing to high praise the man ever offered. Tell me about the Sharingan, Hadrian asked one winter evening. They were sparring, or rather, Hadrian was attempting to land a single hit on Madara while the legendary shinobi dodged everything with contemptuous ease. It was a nightly ritual, designed to build Hadrian's combat instincts and remind him exactly how far he still had to go. Madara caught Hadrian's punch without looking, redirected his momentum, and sent him tumbling into a snowdrift. What do you wish to know? Everything. Hadrian emerged from the snow, brushing ice from his hair. His eyes had that gleam they always got when he was about to ask too many questions. You mentioned it once. Said it was your family's power. But you never explained what it does. Madara considered the boy. No, not boy anymore. Young man. Hadrian had just turned 9, but he carried himself like someone much older. The fire in his eyes had been carefully stoked over these months of training, transforming from raw pain into focused determination. The Sharingan is a dojutsu, Madara began, settling into a teaching posture that Hadrian immediately recognized. An eye technique, passed through the Uchiha bloodline. When awakened, it grants several abilities: enhanced perception of movement, the ability to techniques after seeing them once, and access to genjutsu, mental techniques that allow the user to trap opponents in illusions. That's how you did that thing. Back at the Dursleys. Made Uncle Vernon talk. Yes. Madara's Sharingan spun into visibility, 3 tomo rotating lazily around each pupil. The basic Sharingan is powerful. But it is only the beginning. He told Hadrian about the Mangekyo, the evolved form, awakened through trauma and loss. About its unique abilities, different for every wielder. About the cost, blindness, creeping but inevitable, as payment for power no mortal should possess. That he told Hadrian about the eternal Mangekyo, achieved by transplanting a close relative's eyes. About how he had taken Izuna's gift and merged it with his own, gaining infinite power without the price of darkness. He told Hadrian about the Rinnegan, the legendary eye of the Sage of 6 Paths, and how Madara had awakened it through means he still didn't fully understand. Hadrian listened to all of it with growing wonder. And could I awaken a Sharingan? Unknown. Madara deactivated his eyes, returning them to their normal dark color. You are not Uchiha by blood. The name I gave you does not rewrite your genetics. However, he held up a hand to forestall Hadrian's disappointment. Your magical nature may provide alternative paths. I have observed that your power responds to emotion in ways similar to the Sharingan. Strong feeling enhances your abilities. Trauma could trigger evolutionary changes. So I might develop something similar. Perhaps. Or perhaps something entirely new. Madara smiled slightly. You are unprecedented, Hadrian. A magical being trained in shinobi arts. Whatever power you develop will be your own, not of mine, not an echo of your parents, but something unique to you. Hadrian absorbed this. Then his eyes narrowed. You said the Mangekyo awakens through trauma. Through loss. A pause. You're not going to engineer some kind of terrible experience to force it, are you? Madara's laugh was short and sharp. I considered it. In my darker moments. But no. Trauma cannot be manufactured, the power requires genuine loss, not staged suffering. And, his voice softened, I find I am unwilling to cause you that kind of pain. Even for power. Oh. Hadrian looked genuinely surprised. Thank you. Do not thank me for basic human decency, child. It sets the bar unacceptably low. Hadrian grinned, another expression that had become more common over the past months. Too late. You're stuck being my moral baseline now. Heaven help us both, Madara muttered, but there was warmth beneath the words. Year 2 brought new challenges. Hadrian's magical core had stabilized enough for more advanced training. Madara began teaching him to sense energy at a distance, to read the flow of power through living things, to predict movements before they happened based on muscle tension and subtle shifts in posture. They also began to work on Hadrian's unique abilities. You speak to snakes, Madara observed one spring morning, watching Hadrian have what appeared to be an animated conversation with a grass snake he'd found near the cottage. The snake was hissing and Hadrian was hissing back, and somehow it clearly wasn't just noise. Hadrian looked up, the snake coiled comfortably around his wrist. Oh. Yeah. I've always been able to do that. Didn't know it was special, thought everyone could. The snake at the zoo said most humans can't understand them, though. The snake at the zoo. Madara's voice was carefully neutral. Before the Dursleys. I made the glass disappear and it got out. Hadrian shrugged. That was when they moved me back to the cupboard, actually. Said I was too freaky for a proper room. Madara filed this information away. Parseltongue, the wizards called it, he'd read about it during his research into the magical world. A rare ability, supposedly associated with dark wizards. Another sign that Harry Potter was far more than the simple hero the public believed him to be. This ability is valuable, Madara said. Snakes are everywhere. They see things others miss. Learn to use them as scouts, informants. Build a network of eyes that no one else can perceive. Hadrian brightened. You mean I can have snake friends? I mean you can have snake assets. Friends are an unnecessary complication. But of course, Hadrian made friends with them anyway. Within 6 months, he had a rotating cast of serpents that visited the cottage regularly, bringing news from the surrounding wilderness and occasionally just coming to chat. Madara pretended to disapprove but never actually forbade it. He was getting soft. It was becoming a problem. The 3rd year brought the letters. Hadrian had turned 10. His magical control had advanced to the point where he could fight effectively using a combination of elemental manipulation and physical techniques. He was still nowhere near Madara's level, wouldn't be for years, possibly decades, but he was far beyond any normal wizard his age. More importantly, he was happy. Genuinely happy. The walls around his heart had begun to crumble, trust slowly replacing the defensive emptiness that had defined his early childhood. He laughed now. Made jokes. Argued with Madara about training methods and historical interpretation and whether fish or rabbit was better for dinner. He still had nightmares sometimes. Still flinched at sudden movements occasionally. But he was healing, day by day, in all the ways that mattered, and then the letter arrived. Hadrian found it first, attached to an owl that had been circling the cottage for 3 days, unable to land due to Madara's defensive wards. Eventually, Hadrian had taken pity on the persistent bird and gone outside the boundary to receive its cargo. "It's from Hogwarts," he announced, walking back into the cottage with the envelope in hand. "School of Witchcraft and Wizardry. They want me to attend." Madara looked up from the scroll he'd been studying. "Do they?" Addressed to Mr. H. Potter, the Scottish Highlands, cottage by the stream. "Apparently magic can find me even without a proper address." "Apparently." Hadrian turned the envelope over, examining the wax seal. A coat of arms featuring a lion, an eagle, a badger, and a snake arranged around a letter H. "What do you think?" "I think," Madara set down his scroll, "that this is a decision you must make yourself." "But you have opinions." "I always have opinions." Madara stood, moving to stand beside his adopted son. "Hogwarts is the center of magical education in Britain. It is also almost certainly a trap. Dumbledore runs that school. Dumbledore placed you with the Dursleys. He has been searching for you since the fire. I have intercepted 3 different tracking attempts over the past years." Hadrian's jaw tightened. "He hasn't stopped looking." "No. And now he has found you." Madara tapped the envelope. "This letter is an invitation, but it is also a statement. We know where you are. We can reach you. The time has come to return. So I shouldn't go." "I did not say that." Madara moved to the window, looking out at the highland landscape he'd grown unexpectedly fond of. "There is value in understanding your enemy. In learning the rules of a system before you break them. At Hogwarts, you could gain knowledge, allies, insight into the power structure that wants to control you. And if they try to control me?" Madara turned back, and his smile was all teeth. "Then they will discover that you are no longer a child who can be controlled. You are Hadrian Uchiha. My heir. My student. My son." He placed a hand on Hadrian's shoulder. "You have nothing to fear from these people. Nothing at all." Hadrian looked at the letter. Looked at his father. Made his decision. "I'll go," he said. "But on my terms. Not as Harry Potter, the lost hero. Not as their weapon or their symbol. As myself. And if they don't like what I've become," his magic flared, fire dancing in his green eyes, "that's their problem." Madara laughed. Actually laughed, full and genuine, a sound that still felt strange coming from him. "Then we have a year to prepare," he said. "A year to make you into something that will make Albus Dumbledore regret ever putting you in that cupboard." "A year," Hadrian agreed. "Let's make it count." They made it count. The final year of Hadrian's primary training was the most intense yet. Madara pushed him harder than ever before, refining his skills, expanding his knowledge, forcing him to integrate everything he'd learned into a cohesive fighting style. Physical conditioning reached near shinobi levels. Hadrian could run for miles without tiring, move silently through any terrain, climb surfaces that should have been impossible. His reaction time had improved to the point where he could catch arrows from the air, a skill Madara insisted on testing regularly. Much to Hadrian's occasional alarm, magical control became second nature. Fire, water, earth, air, Hadrian could manipulate all 4 elements now, though fire remained his strongest affinity. He'd also developed several unique techniques, blending magical and physical combat in ways that Madara found genuinely impressive, and then there was the genjutsu. Hadrian couldn't cast it himself, his power didn't work that way, but Madara had trained him extensively in recognizing and breaking mental intrusions. The Imperious curse that wizards feared? Hadrian could shake it off through sheer willpower. Legilimency, the mind-reading technique? His mental defenses were strong enough to give even Madara difficulty. "They will try to read your thoughts," Madara warned him. "Dumbledore, especially. He is known for it, subtle intrusions, surface scans, always with a grandfatherly smile to the violation. You must be prepared." "I am." Hadrian's mental walls were solid, built through countless hours of math ion and focus exercises. They won't find anything I don't want them to find. Good. Madara paused. There is one more thing we must discuss. Your name. Hadrian looked up. My name? You cannot arrive at Hogwarts as Hadrian Uchiha. The name Potter carries too much weight in that world, disappearing entirely would cause more problems than it solves. You must reclaim it. But I don't want, I know. Madara's voice was gentle, which was always disorienting. But consider, Harry Potter is a mask. A role to play. You wear it at Hogwarts, learn what you need to learn, and then discard it when the time is right. The world knows Harry Potter. Let them think they're getting what they expect. What they're actually getting is Hadrian Uchiha, hiding in plain sight. Hadrian considered this. The strategic value was obvious, his training had included extensive study of misdirection and information control. Being underestimated was an advantage. Being known as the lost boy who lived, returned at last, would make everyone focus on their preconceptions rather than reality. All right, he said finally. Harry Potter at Hogwarts. Hadrian Uchiha everywhere else. But you're still my father. Always. Madara placed his hand on Hadrian's shoulder, a gesture that had become familiar over the years, comfortable in a way neither of them had expected. No matter what name you wear, no matter how far you go, no matter what comes next. You are my son. Nothing will ever change that. Hadrian smiled. It was a real smile, the kind that reached his eyes, the kind that 7-year-old Harry Potter had been incapable of producing. Let's go show them what an Uchiha can do. The train left from King's Cross Station on September 1. Madara had brought them to London the night before, one of the techniques he'd managed to adapt to this world's magical system. They'd spent the evening going over final preparations, contingency plans, communication methods. Madara would not be at Hogwarts, but he would never be more than a few hours away. Remember, Madara said as they approached the barrier between platforms 9 and 10, you are there to learn. To observe. To build your strength. You are not there to start a war. Unless they start it first. Unless they start it first, Madara agreed. In which case, end it quickly and decisively. No half measures. Hadrian nodded. He was wearing wizarding robes for the first time, purchased from Diagon Alley during a carefully disguised shopping trip, and they felt strange after years of practical training clothes. His wand, holly and phoenix feather, sat in a holster on his forearm. He didn't need it for most of his techniques, but it was useful for the kind of subtle magic that blending in required. All right, Hadrian said. Weakly. More if something important happens. See that you do. Madara stepped back. Now go. Make me proud. I always do. Hadrian walked toward the barrier. Didn't look back. Stepped through the seemingly solid brick wall and into the chaos of platform 9 3/4, noise hit him first, children shouting, parents crying, owls screeching, cats yowling, the general pandemonium of hundreds of magical families saying goodbye all at once. The scarlet steam engine dominated the platform, gleaming and somehow alive with magic. Hadrian moved through the crowd like water, sliding between groups, drawing no attention. His training had included social camouflage, the art of being present without being noticed, and he deployed it automatically now that he found an empty compartment near the back of the train, settled in, and waited. The next 7 years were about to begin. The compartment door slid open about 10 minutes after the train started moving. A boy with bright red hair and a smudge of dirt on his nose poked his head in. Mind if I sit here? Everywhere else is full. Hadrian gestured to the empty seats. Help yourself. The boy entered, dragging a battered trunk that had clearly seen better days. He was tall for his age, gangly, with the kind of open, honest face that suggested he'd never had to what he was thinking. I'm Ron, the boy said, collapsing into the seat across from Hadrian. Ron Weasley. Harry. The old name still felt strange on his tongue, but he wore it smoothly enough. Harry Potter. Ron's eyes went wide. His mouth fell open. For a moment, he simply stared, processing. Bloody hell, he whispered. You're Harry Potter. The Harry Potter? With the scar and everything? Hadrian brushed his hair aside, revealing the lightning bolt mark on his forehead. Madara had offered to remove it once. Scars were vulnerabilities that enemies could target, but Hadrian had refused. The scar was part of who he was. Part of what he'd survived. He wouldn't erase it just because it was inconvenient. That's me. Bloody hell. Ron seemed to have lost the ability to form other sentences. I can't believe, everyone's been wondering, you just vanished, mate. Years ago. Nobody knew where you'd gone. My mum was dead worried, said Dumbledore himself was searching. I was being trained. Hadrian kept his voice casual, offering just enough truth to satisfy curiosity without revealing anything important. My guardian took me somewhere safe. Taught me things. What kind of things? Hadrian smiled. It was not a reassuring smile. Useful things. Ron seemed to pick up on something in his tone, because he leaned back slightly, reassessing. Right. Well. That's good, I suppose. Being trained. Makes sense, really, given, everything. The Dark Lord. Yeah. Ron shuddered. You know who. Most people don't say his name. Voldemort. Ron actually flinched, which Hadrian found fascinating. The name carried power in this world, not magical power, but psychological. People have been trained to fear even the syllables. Interesting. Blimey, you just say it. It's a name. Hadrian shrugged. Names have no power unless you give it to them. Voldemort was a wizard, not a god. He died. His memory doesn't deserve fear. Ron was staring at him with something approaching awe. You sound so. I don't know. Different. From what I expected. What did you expect? I don't know. Someone more, scared. Overwhelmed. You've never been to the wizarding world before, right? But you're acting like you own the place. Hadrian laughed. Let's just say my guardian didn't believe in raising me unprepared. They talked for a while longer, Ron doing most of the chatting. Hadrian learned about the Weasley family, 7 children, not much money, fiercely loyal to each other and to Dumbledore. He learned about Hogwarts houses, Gryffindor for the brave, Slytherin for the ambitious, Ravenclaw for the clever, Hufflepuff for the loyal. He learned that Ron desperately wanted to prove himself, to be more than just another Weasley brother, to be special. Hadrian filed all of it away. Useful information. Potential ally or potential tool, depending on how things developed. The compartment door opened again. That a girl with bushy brown hair and an air of barely contained anxiety bustled in without waiting for an invitation. Has anyone seen a toad? A boy named Neville's lost one. Haven't seen any toads, Ron said, clearly annoyed by the intrusion. Oh. The girl looked disappointed, then noticed Hadrian and froze. Her eyes went to his forehead, found the scar, widened dramatically. Oh my goodness. You're Harry Potter. I've read all about you. You're in modern magical history and the rise and fall of the dark arts and great wizarding events of the 20th century and, breathe, Hadrian suggested. The girl stopped, took a breath, blushed furiously. Sorry. I'm Hermione Granger. Muggle-born. Just found out about magic this year. I've been reading everything I can get my hands on. Do you know you're in 6 different books? I did not, Hadrian admitted. Though I'm curious what those books say about me. They don't know much, actually. Just that you survived the killing curse and defeated you-know-who and then disappeared. Some of them speculate about where you've been, but nothing confirmed. Interesting. Hadrian gestured to an empty seat. Join us. I'd like to hear more about what the books say. Hermione sat down, still slightly flustered but clearly delighted to have an audience for her accumulated knowledge. She launched into a comprehensive summary of everything she'd learned about Harry Potter's legend, the magical world's assumptions, the theories about his disappearance. Hadrian listened carefully. Madara had taught him that information was the most valuable weapon, more powerful than any technique, any blade, any magical spell. Understanding what people believed about him gave him power over those beliefs. The train carried them north, toward Scotland, toward Hogwarts, toward the beginning of the end of Harry Potter, and the rise of something far more dangerous. The castle was impressive. Hadrian would give them that, rising from the darkness like a crown of stone and starlight, Hogwarts dominated the landscape with the confidence of something that had stood for 1,000 years and intended to stand for 1,000 more. Torches blazed in countless windows. Towers reached toward the sky. Magic hung thick in the air, so dense Hadrian could almost taste it. The first years crossed the lake in small boats, appropriately awed by the spectacle. Ron kept gasping at every new wonder. Hermione was muttering facts about the castle's architecture. Neville, the toad-losing boy, who had found both his amphibian and a seat in their boat, was too terrified to speak at all. Hadrian watched the castle with calculating eyes. Madara had described it as a fortress. Looking at it now, Hadrian understood what he meant. Those walls had been built to withstand siege. Those towers offered commanding views in every direction. The lake itself was a defensive measure, forcing any ground assault to funnel through predictable approaches. 1,000 years of accumulated magical protection. The most secure building in Britain, the perfect place to trap a hero. Or the perfect place for a wolf to learn the habits of the sheep. They disembarked at a small harbor cut into the cliff face, climbed what felt like 100 stairs, and found themselves in an entrance hall that could have fit the Dursleys' entire house without touching the walls. A stern-looking witch in green robes met them. McGonagall, Hadrian knew from his research, deputy headmistress, transfiguration professor, head of Gryffindor House. One of Dumbledore's most trusted lieutenants. "Welcome to Hogwarts," she said, and her voice carried the kind of authority that expected obedience. "The sorting ceremony will begin shortly. You will be divided into one of 4 houses, Gryffindor, Hufflepuff, Ravenclaw, or Slytherin. Your house will be your family within these walls. Triumphs will earn you points, rule-breaking will lose them." She went on about the importance of house pride and academic achievement. Hadrian listened with half an ear, more interested in cataloging his fellow first years. There was Draco Malfoy, blonde, pale, carried himself like he expected the world to bend around him. His father was a known Death Eater who had bought his way out of Azkaban. Potential enemy, potential source of information about the Dark Lord's remnants. There was Daphne Greengrass, dark-haired, Ice Queen, beautiful even at 11, watching everything with calculating eyes that reminded Hadrian uncomfortably of his own. Potential ally, if she could be convinced. Potential threat if she couldn't. There was Neville Longbottom, still clutching his toad, whose parents had been tortured into insanity by Voldemort's followers. Potential casualty waiting to happen, unless someone taught him to be more. So many children. So many tools waiting to be shaped. Hadrian smiled to himself. This was going to be interesting. The sorting hat was sentient, that threw Hadrian more than anything else had. An artifact that read minds, analyzed personalities, made decisions about human beings' futures based on internal criteria it refused to fully explain. Madara would have destroyed it on principle. No object should have that kind of power over people, but Hadrian wasn't Madara. Not entirely. And the hat was useful, in its way. Harry Potter. The great hall went silent. Every head turned. Every eye fixed on Hadrian as he walked toward the stool with the kind of deliberate calm that only came from extensive practice. He felt the weight of their attention like a physical thing, expectations, assumptions, hopes, fears, all projected onto a boy they'd never actually met. That he sat. The hat descended over his eyes. "Oh my," a voice whispered directly into his mind. "Oh my. This is unusual." Hadrian felt the hat's presence probing at his mental defenses. Testing them. He allowed it surface access, enough to satisfy curiosity, while keeping his deeper thoughts walled away. Impressive, the hat murmured. Very impressive. I have sorted thousands of students over the centuries, Mr. Potter, or should I say Mr. Uchiha, and I have never encountered a mind quite like yours. You can see that. I can see many things. The question is what to do with you. The hat seemed to shuffle through possibilities. Gryffindor, perhaps. You have courage enough for 10 wizards. But no, your courage is cold, calculated, nothing like the hot-blooded valor Godric prized. Not Gryffindor then. Ravenclaw. Your thirst for knowledge is genuine. But you do not seek understanding for its own sake. You seek it as a weapon. Rowena would have found that unsettling. Not Ravenclaw either. Hufflepuff. No, let us not waste time. You are loyal to one person, and that person is not yourself. Helga's house is not for you. Which leaves Slytherin. Slytherin. The hat seemed to sigh. Cunning. Ambition. A willingness to achieve your ends by any means necessary. You would fit there, Mr. Uchiha. You would fit there very well. Hadrian considered. Slytherin would place him among the children of Death Eaters, give him access to information about Voldemort's remnants, position him as an insider in the pureblood political game, but it would also make Dumbledore suspicious. The boy who lived, sorted into the house of the Dark Lord who had tried to kill him. That would raise questions. Draw scrutiny. Complicate the careful mask he was constructing, put me somewhere unexpected, Hadrian suggested. Somewhere that will make them underestimate me. Gryffindor, then. The hat sounded amused. The house of Harry Potter's parents. The house where everyone will expect the brave hero to land. They will see what they want to see, never looking deeper. Exactly. Very well. The hat's presence retreated from his mind. You are a dangerous young man, Hadrian Uchiha. I look forward to seeing what you become. And then, out loud, Gryffindor. The hall erupted. The Gryffindor table exploded into cheers, students standing and applauding and chanting, "We got Potter. We got Potter." Hadrian allowed himself a small, appropriately humble smile as he walked to join them. Ron whooped and pounded him on the back. Hermione was sorted into Gryffindor minutes later and squeezed in beside him, beaming. Neville made it too. To his own obvious surprise, the feast began. The ceiling showed a perfect night sky. Magic sparkled in the air, and at the head table, Albus Dumbledore watched Hadrian with twinkling eyes that contained something sharp and calculating beneath the kindly grandfather facade. Hadrian met his gaze without flinching. Smiled pleasantly. Raised his goblet in a subtle toast. "That I know what you are," that smile said. "And I am not afraid." Dumbledore's eyes widened, just slightly. Then he smiled too, a matching expression, equally layered with hidden meaning. The game had begun. "What are you planning?" The question came from Daphne Greengrass, delivered at a whisper during the chaos of leaving the Great Hall. She had somehow materialized beside Hadrian, close enough to speak without being overheard, far enough to seem coincidental. Hadrian kept walking. "I don't know what you mean. Please." Her voice was flat. "I watched you during the sorting. You weren't nervous. Weren't excited. You were assessing. Cataloging. Every person, every entrance, every potential threat. That's not how first years behave. That's how soldiers behave." Interesting theory. It's not a theory. She matched his pace perfectly, a skill that suggested she too had training most 11-year-olds lacked. "I don't know what you are, Harry Potter. But I know you're not what they think you are. And I want in." Hadrian stopped. Looked at her directly for the first time. Those ice-blue eyes stared back without fear or deference. "Why would I trust you?" "Because I'm not asking for your secrets." Daphne's lips curved in a smile that suggested she knew exactly how dangerous this conversation was. I'm asking for the opportunity to prove I can be useful. The political landscape is shifting. The old families are choosing sides. I would prefer to choose the winning side early. And you think that's me? I think you're the most interesting variable in a very predictable equation. She produced a card from nowhere, pressed it into his hand. I'll be watching, Potter. When you're ready to stop pretending to be harmless, let me know. She disappeared into the crowd before Hadrian could respond that he looked at the card. A simple piece of parchment with a name, Daphne Greengrass, and a symbol he didn't recognize. Madara would approve, he thought. Potential allies finding you was always better than having to find them yourself. That he tucked the card away and followed his housemates toward Gryffindor Tower. The first day of his return to the wizarding world was complete. Tomorrow, the real work would begin. Chapter 2, Forged in Fire. The letter arrived at breakfast 3 days into term, carried by an owl so nondescript it was practically invisible among the morning mail rush. Hadrian caught it without looking up from his porridge, fingers closing around the small scroll with practiced ease. Ron was too busy shoveling bacon into his mouth to notice. Hermione was buried in a Transfiguration textbook, muttering about wand movements. The seal was unmarked. The handwriting inside was familiar, cottage secure. No surveillance detected. Report weekly as agreed. Do not forget who you are. No signature. None needed. Hadrian burned the message with a whispered word, the paper flashing to ash between his fingers before anyone could see. He scattered the remains into his pumpkin juice and drank it down. You all right there, Harry? Ron asked through a mouthful of food. You've got a weird look on your face. Just thinking about classes. Hadrian smiled, and it was the right kind of smile, slightly nervous, appropriately eager, exactly what an 11-year-old should look like on his first real day of magical education. Bit overwhelming, isn't it? Tell me about it. 5 brothers went through this place and none of them warned me about the moving staircases. Nearly walked off a landing yesterday because I wasn't paying attention. Hermione looked up from her book, frowning. The staircases follow predictable patterns, actually. If you study the timing, you can, Hermione. It's 7 in the morning. No studying before at least second breakfast. There's no such thing as second breakfast. Shows what you know. Hadrian let their bickering wash over him, cataloguing the great hall with the same systematic attention he'd applied to the train and the dormitory and every other space he'd encountered. Exits, main doors, staff entrance behind the head table, at least 2 hidden passages he'd identified from subtle drafts. Threats, minimal at present, though several older Slytherins kept glancing his direction with expressions that promised future complications. Assets, the house tables provided natural cover, the enchanted ceiling created visual chaos useful for misdirection, the general noise level allowed private conversation. Dumbledore was watching him again. The old wizard sat at the center of the head table, seemingly absorbed in conversation with the tiny charms professor. But Hadrian had been trained to recognize surveillance, and Dumbledore's attention kept drifting his way with the persistence of a tracking spell. Testing me, Hadrian thought. Waiting to see what I do. What I revealed. That he revealed nothing. Ate his breakfast. Laughed at Ron's jokes. Pretended to be exactly what everyone expected Harry Potter to be. The mask was comfortable. It fit well, but beneath it, Hadrian Uchiha was already planning. Transfiguration was McGonagall's domain, and she ran it like a military operation. Transfiguration is some of the most complex and dangerous magic you will learn at Hogwarts, she announced, pacing before them with the controlled energy of a predator choosing her moment. Anyone messing around in my class will leave and not come back. You have been warned. She transformed her desk into a pig and back again. The class gasped appropriately. Hadrian noted the wand movements, the subtle verbal component, the way her magic flowed through the transformation, structured, precise, nothing wasted, interesting. Wizarding magic was so inefficient. All that power channeled through a stick, filtered through words and gestures, producing results that should have required a fraction of the energy. Madara could have done the same transformation with pure chakra, faster and with less warning, but there was elegance in the structure, Hadrian admitted. Stability. Reproducibility. Wizards had traded raw power for reliability, and for most purposes, that trade made sense. Not for Hadrian's purposes, though. He would learn their methods, information was always valuable, but he wouldn't limit himself to them. The practical portion involved turning matches into needles. Hermione managed a slight silvering effect within the first hour. Ron's match caught fire. Hadrian sat unchanged on his desk, exactly as he intended. Drawing attention was counterproductive at this stage. Let them think Harry Potter was average. Unexceptional. Just another first year struggling with the basics. McGonagall paused by his desk, examining his untransformed match with an unreadable expression. Having difficulty, Mr. Potter? Yes, Professor. He made sure to sound appropriately frustrated. I think I'm getting the wand movement wrong. She demonstrated again, slow and precise. Like so. The swish must be fluid, not choppy. Try again. Hadrian tried again, deliberately fumbling the motion. The match twitched. He frowned at it as if confused. Keep practicing, McGonagall said, but something in her eyes suggested she wasn't entirely convinced by his performance. You'll get it eventually. She moved on. Hadrian filed away her suspicion for future consideration. Playing weak had its own dangers. Too much failure could draw scrutiny from the competent observers, raise questions about whether the boy who lived had been damaged by whatever had happened during his disappearance. He would need to show improvement soon, gradual, believable improvement that fit the narrative of a dedicated student finding his feet. The mask required constant maintenance. Potions was worse. Severus Snape swept into the dungeon classroom like a particularly vindictive shadow, robes billowing, expression suggesting he'd rather be anywhere else dealing with anyone other than first years. His eyes found Hadrian immediately, found him and fixed on him with an intensity that went beyond simple recognition. Harry Potter. The name dripped with contempt. Our new celebrity. The Slytherins sniggered. The Gryffindors shifted uncomfortably. Hadrian met Snape's gaze without flinching, expression politely attentive. Tell me, Potter. What would I get if I added powdered root of asphodel to an infusion of wormwood? Hadrian knew the answer. He'd memorized the first-year curriculum during the year of preparation, cross-referencing with Madara's knowledge of botanical compounds and their effects. Asphodel and wormwood created the Draught of Living Death, a powerful sleeping potion that could be lethal in the wrong doses, but answering correctly would draw attention. Snape clearly wanted him to fail, wanted to humiliate the son of James Potter in front of the class. Giving him that satisfaction might actually be useful. I don't know, sir. Snape's lip curled. Clearly fame isn't everything. He fired more questions. Bezoars, Wolfsbane, Monkshood, and Hadrian answered each with carefully calibrated ignorance. Not stupid. Just unprepared. A boy who'd missed years of magical education and hadn't caught up yet. Tut, tut. Thought you'd be special, didn't you, Potter? Thought the rules wouldn't apply? Snape turned away dismissively. For your information, Potter, asphodel and wormwood make a sleeping potion so powerful it is known as the Draught of Living Death. A bezoar is a stone taken from the stomach of a goat and will save you from most poisons. As for monkshood and wolfsbane, they are the same plant, which also goes by the name of aconite. Well? Why aren't you all ing that down? Quill scratched frantically. Hadrian rode along with everyone else, keeping his head down, playing the chastened celebrity, but he watched Snape through lowered lashes, analyzing. The professor's hatred was personal, far too intense for simple house rivalry or resentment of fame. This was something deeper. Something connected to James Potter, probably, or to the circumstances of Voldemort's fall, useful information. Snape was one of Dumbledore's inner circle. Understanding what motivated him could provide leverage later. The class continued. Hadrian's potion was deliberately mediocre, functional but unimpressive. Snape found fault anyway, vanishing it with a contemptuous flick of his wand and assigning detention for gross incompetence. Neville's potion had actually exploded. He was covered in boils and being rushed to the hospital wing. Hadrian wondered, not for the first time, how this educational system had survived for a millennium. The first week established patterns, classes followed a predictable rotation. Hadrian attended them all, performed adequately in each, built the reputation of a student who worked hard but achieved middle-of-the-road results. The professors noted his effort. His classmates accepted him as one of their own, famous but not threatening, special but not spectacularly so. The mask held, outside of classes. Hadrian mapped the castle. Hogwarts was vast, far larger than it appeared from the outside, thanks to magical space expansion and 1,000 years of haphazard additions. Secret passages honeycombed the walls. Rooms appeared and disappeared according to rules Hadrian hadn't yet deciphered. Staircases moved, portraits watched, suits of armor occasionally wandered off when no one was looking. It would take months to understand the castle fully. Hadrian didn't have months. So he cheated. You want me to do what? The snake's name was Sasha, a grass snake who'd been living in the castle greenhouses for 3 generations. She was old for her kind, clever, and deeply suspicious of the strange wizard who'd wandered into her territory and started hissing at her. Explore, Hadrian repeated in Parseltongue, keeping his voice low even though no one else could understand him. I need to know every passage, every hidden room, every place the humans don't go. You can fit into spaces I can't. Help me, and I'll help you. Sasha's tongue flickered, tasting the air, tasting his intentions. What could a speaker offer that I need? Warmth. Food. Protection from the cats and owls. Hadrian crouched down, bringing himself closer to her level. I know you've lost family to the castle's predators. Work with me, and I'll make sure no snake in Hogwarts goes hungry or cold again. It was manipulation. Hadrian knew that. Sasha probably knew it too, but it was also true. Hadrian had always felt kinship with snakes, their cold practicality, their patience, their willingness to wait for the perfect moment to strike. If building a network of serpentine informants cost him some mice from the kitchens and warming spells in the greenhouses, that was a trivial price for unprecedented intelligence access. Sasha considered for a long moment. Then, I will spread your words to the others. If they agree, we will explore. Thank you. Don't thank me yet, speaker. Her eyes glittered in the greenhouse light. Snakes have long memories. Betray us, and you will discover exactly how long. She vanished into the undergrowth. Hadrian smiled and straightened. Point 1 asset secured. Dozens more to go. The first month passed quickly. Hadrian's snake network expanded. Sasha recruited others, garden snakes, dungeon vipers, even a particularly ancient asp that claimed to have met Salazar Slytherin himself. They reported to Hadrian weekly, their hissed intelligence building a mental map of Hogwarts that no human had ever possessed. Secret passages were catalogued. Abandoned classrooms were marked. The third-floor corridors. This world never stopped surprising him. More importantly, Hadrian began to understand the power structure that controlled his life. Dumbledore ran Hogwarts, but he didn't run it alone. The Board of Governors held nominal authority, wealthy pureblood families who funded the school and expected influence in return. Lucius Malfoy, Draco's father, sat on that board. So did representatives from the Greengrass, Knott, and Parkinson families. Below the governors came the Ministry of Magic, technically responsible for educational standards but practically more concerned with political maneuvering. The current minister, Cornelius Fudge, was a weak man dependent on Dumbledore's approval and Malfoy's money. He would be easy to manipulate if the need arose. The staff presented more complex dynamics. McGonagall was loyal to Dumbledore but had her own principles. Snape served the headmaster but clearly despised him. Professor Quirrell, the defense against the dark arts teacher, was a mystery, nervous, stuttering, apparently afraid of his own shadow, and yet, Hadrian had noticed something about Quirrell. Something that didn't fit. The man's magic felt wrong. Corrupted. Twisted in ways that reminded Hadrian uncomfortably of Madara's descriptions of tailed beast chakra, immense power improperly contained, leaking at the edges, warping everything it touched. The back of Quirrell's head was always wrapped in a turban. He claimed it was a gift from an African prince, a reward for dealing with a zombie. The smell that sometimes wafted from it suggested something far less pleasant. Hadrian watched Quirrell carefully, and Quirrell never seemed to notice, but something else did. The first time Hadrian's scar burned, he was sitting in defense class, half listening to Quirrell stammer about vampires. Pain lanced through his forehead, sharp, sudden, centered exactly on the lightning bolt that marked him as the boy who lived. He didn't flinch. Didn't gasp. Kept his face carefully blank while his mind raced. The scar had never hurt before. Not once in 11 years. Not even when Madara had probed it with his Sharingan, searching for magical traps or tracking spells. Why now? Why here? Quirrell's back was turned, writing on the blackboard. The turban bobbed with each movement. The pain intensified when Quirrell faced the class again. Faded when he turned away. The turban, Hadrian realized. Something in the turban is making my scar hurt. He filed that information away for urgent analysis. Something was very wrong with Professor Quirrell, and whatever it was, it knew Harry Potter was watching. Halloween approached with all the subtlety of a herd of drunk hippogriffs. The castle transformed. Giant pumpkins floated through corridors. Bats swarmed in artistic formations. The ghosts organized elaborate haunting competitions, with nearly headless Nick particularly invested in besting the Bloody Baron's eternal championship streak. Hadrian observed the festivities with detached amusement. Holidays had meant nothing at the Dursleys, extra chores at best, extra beatings at worst. Madara had no patience for celebration either, viewing festivals as inefficient uses of training time, but Ron was excited. Hermione was excited about being unexcited, which somehow managed to be its own form of excitement. The entire castle buzzed with anticipation. The feast is supposed to be incredible, Ron said, practically bouncing as they headed to Charm's class. Fred and George say the pumpkins actually sing. And there's supposed to be dancing skeletons and live entertainment, and it's just dinner, Ron. Hermione's tone suggested she was above such frivolity, but she was walking faster than usual. Honestly, you'd think magic was new to you. It is new to me. Well, new to being actually at Hogwarts for it. Home was never like this. Hadrian let them talk, attention fixed on something else entirely. Quirrell had been behaving strangely all week, more nervous than usual, constantly glancing over his shoulder, disappearing for hours without explanation. The scar pain had become a near-constant background hum whenever Hadrian came within 50 feet of the man. Something was building. Something was about to happen. Charm's class was levitation today. Professor Flitwick, tiny, enthusiastic, surprisingly powerful for his size, demonstrated the spell with infectious joy. Swish and flick. Swish and flick. Remember, the wrist movement is crucial. Hadrian partnered with Ron, who was having absolutely no success with his feather. Wingardium Leviosa. Ron waved his wand like a club. The feather didn't move. You're saying it wrong, Hermione said from the next table over, where her own feather was already floating serenely. It's Leviosa, not Leviosa. Make the gar nice and long. You do it then, if you're so clever. Hermione's feather rose higher. Ron's face went red. Hadrian sighed internally. Managing these two was exhausting sometimes. Watch, he said quietly, positioning Ron's arm. You're moving from the elbow. The power needs to come from the wrist. Like this. He guided Ron through the motion, slow, controlled, the exact movement Flitwick had demonstrated. On the third attempt, Ron's feather twitched. I did it. I actually, oh. The feather had fallen again. Almost did it. Better than nothing. Keep practicing. Hadrian's own feather remained stubbornly grounded, exactly as he intended. He'd already mastered wandless levitation. Moving objects without any implement was child's play after 3 years of Madara's training. But showing that ability would raise questions he didn't want to answer. Besides, watching Hermione and Ron snipe at each other was almost entertaining. She's mental, that one, Ron grumbled as they left class. No wonder she hasn't got any friends. Hermione was right behind them. Hadrian saw her face crumple, saw her push past and disappear down a side corridor, heard the sob she failed to suppress. Ron. What? She heard you. Ron's expression shifted from annoyance to guilt in rapid succession. Oh. I didn't know she was, find her. Apologize. But, now, Ron. Something in Hadrian's voice made Ron flinch and nod quickly. He hurried after Hermione, leaving Hadrian alone in the corridor. This was inefficient. Managing the emotional dynamics of 11-year-olds had not been part of his training curriculum. But Ron and Hermione were useful, Ron's family connections, Hermione's intelligence and magical talent, and allowing their relationship to fracture over petty hurt feelings would be wasteful. Hadrian would repair what needed repairing. It was simply good resource management. The Halloween feast was everything Ron had promised. Thousands of live bats swooped beneath a ceiling enchanted to show a stormy night sky. Carved pumpkins grinned from every surface, some of them actually singing badly off-key renditions of wizard ballads. The food was excessive: roast beef, roast chicken, pork chops, lamb chops, sausages, bacon, steak, boiled potatoes, roast potatoes, chips, Yorkshire pudding, peas, carrots, gravy, ketchup, and for some reason, mint humbugs. Hadrian ate mechanically, enjoying none of it. His scar was burning constantly now. Quirrell sat at the head table, barely touching his food, sweat visible on his brow even from across the great hall. Whatever was happening, it was happening tonight. Ron had found Hermione. She'd apparently been crying in a bathroom for hours, and Ron's apology had devolved into an awkward mutual acknowledgement that they'd both been prats. They sat together now, carefully not looking at each other, which was somehow progress. The doors burst open, Quirrell ran in, turban askew, robes torn, face white with terror. Troll! Troll in the dungeon! Silence! Then, thought you ought to know. Quirrell collapsed in a dead faint, pandemonium erupted. Students screamed. Tables overturned. Food went flying as hundreds of children tried to flee in every direction simultaneously. Dumbledore's voice cut through the chaos like a blade. Silence. Everyone froze. Prefects, lead your houses back to the dormitories immediately. Teachers, follow me to the dungeons. The evacuation began. Hadrian moved with the Gryffindor crowd, keeping close to Ron, mind racing. Something was wrong, not the troll. Trolls were dangerous but manageable, and the teachers could handle one easily. The wrongness was in Quirrell. In the performance he'd just delivered, the man had been in defense against the dark arts. He'd traveled the world, dealt with vampires and zombies and dark creatures of every variety. And he'd fainted at the sight of a troll. Hadrian didn't believe it for a second. This was a distraction. Something else was happening while everyone focused on the dungeons, the third floor. Hadrian realized. The dog. Whatever it's guarding, but he couldn't break away to investigate. Too many witnesses, too much attention already fixed on the famous Harry Potter. Any deviation would be noticed and reported unless, Ron. Hadrian grabbed his friend's arm, pulling him aside as the crowd surged past. Hermione wasn't at the feast. Ron's face went pale. What? She was in the bathroom. Crying. She doesn't know about the troll. Oh no. Oh no. Ron looked around wildly. We have to tell someone. There's no time. The bathrooms are near the dungeons. If the troll, he didn't need to finish. Ron was already running. Hadrian followed, and for once, he wasn't pretending. Hermione was genuinely useful. He didn't want her to die. The fact that this also gave him an excuse to be away from the group, that was simply fortunate coincidence. The troll was bigger than Hadrian expected. 12 feet tall, gray-skinned, carrying a club the size of a small tree. It had apparently gotten confused on its way to the dungeons and found the girls' bathroom instead. The sounds of destruction echoed through the corridor, shattering porcelain, splintering wood, and somewhere in the chaos, Hermione screaming. She's in there. Ron skidded to a halt outside the door, face ashen. We have to we have to do something. Hadrian assessed the situation in the span of a heartbeat. The troll was slow but strong. It was thick enough to resist most magic. The club was its primary weapon, remove that, and it became significantly less dangerous. Distracted, Hadrian ordered. Throw things. Make noise. Keep its attention on you. What are you going to do? End this. He was through the door before Ron could argue. The bathroom was destroyed. Sinks had been ripped from walls. Stalls lay in splinters. Water sprayed from broken pipes, creating a miniature flood that made footing treacherous. Hermione cowered in the corner, trapped behind a pile of debris, too terrified to move. The troll loomed over her, raising its club for a killing blow. Hadrian moved, not at wizard speed, at shinobi speed. 3 years of Madara's training condensed into a single burst of motion, crossing the distance between door and troll faster than the human eye could track. His wand slashed through the air. Defindo. The cutting curse caught the troll's wrist at exactly the right angle. The club fell from suddenly nerveless fingers, crashing to the floor inches from Hermione's head. The troll roared, spinning to face this new threat. One massive arm swept toward Hadrian, slow, so impossibly slow to eyes trained to follow Madara Uchiha in combat that he ducked beneath it. Rolled forward. Came up inside the troll's guard, too close for it to bring its remaining arm to bear. Incendio. Fire erupted from his wand, not the weak flame of a first-year practice spell, but a concentrated lance of heat that Hadrian had been perfecting in secret. It struck the troll's face, specifically its eyes, and the creature screamed in agony. Blind and burning, the troll staggered backward. Hadrian followed, maintaining pressure, firing spell after spell, cutting curses, more fire. A bludgeoning hex that Madara had taught him was technically illegal but extremely effective against armored opponents. Ron appeared in the doorway, jaw hanging open. Bloody hell. Get Hermione. Hadrian shouted without breaking concentration. Get her out. Ron scrambled to comply, dragging a shock-frozen Hermione toward the exit. The troll lurched after them, still dangerous despite its wounds. Hadrian made a decision that he drew on his magic, not the wand-filtered trickle that wizards used, but the raw essence burning in his core. The power Madara had taught him to access. The fire that had always been waiting. His palm slammed against the troll's back. The creature's spine wasn't natural. It was reinforced with magical tissue, denser than normal bone, evolved to withstand impacts that would shatter ordinary skeletons, but nothing evolved to withstand what Hadrian channeled through his touch. Pure magical force, shaped by intent, detonated inside the troll's body. Not fire this time, something more fundamental. A disruption of the energy that held living tissue together. The troll dropped like its strings had been cut. Hadrian stood over the body, breathing hard, magic crackling around his fingers. The mask had slipped. For the first time since arriving at Hogwarts, he'd shown what he could really do. Ron and Hermione stared at him from the doorway. Their expressions were identical, shock, fear, and something that might have been awe. Harry, Hermione whispered. What was that? Before Hadrian could answer, footsteps thundered in the corridor. McGonagall burst through the door, followed by Snape and Quirrell. They took in the scene, the destroyed bathroom, the unconscious troll, the 3 first-years standing amid the wreckage. Explain, McGonagall demanded. Now. Hadrian's mind raced. The truth was impossible. Admitting to the abilities he'd displayed would unravel everything, the careful mask, the mediocre student persona, the entire deception he'd spent months constructing, but Hermione spoke first. It was my fault, Professor. Her voice shook but held steady. I went looking for the troll. I'd read about them, thought I could handle it. Harry and Ron came to find me. They saved my life. She was lying. Lying smoothly, confidently, with the kind of conviction that suggested she'd decided something important in the last 30 seconds. Is this true, Mr. Potter? Mr. Weasley? Ron nodded frantically. Yes, ma'am. We couldn't leave her, you know. So we came to help, and Harry was brilliant. really, all that spell work, just amazing, enough, Weasley. McGonagall's gaze fixed on Hadrian. Mr. Potter. That troll should have been far beyond first-year capabilities. How did you defeat it? I got lucky, Professor. Hadrian made his voice shake slightly, adding a tremor that suggested fading adrenaline. I just cast everything I could think of. The spells worked better than I expected. Maybe because I was scared. It was a weak explanation. McGonagall clearly didn't believe it entirely. But Quirrell was watching too, and the scar was burning, and Hadrian needed this conversation to end before more questions got asked. 5 points, McGonagall said finally. From Miss Granger, for foolishness. And 5 points each to Mr. Potter and Mr. Weasley, for sheer dumb luck. She paused. Now go to your dormitory. All of you. Immediately. They went. Hadrian felt Snape's eyes on his back the entire way out. The potions master suspected something, that much was obvious. But suspicion wasn't proof, and without proof, Snape could do nothing. The mask had cracked that it hadn't shattered, not yet. Hermione found him in the common room that night. The other Gryffindors had gone to bed, exhausted by the evening's excitement. Ron was snoring loudly enough to be heard through 2 floors. Only Hadrian remained awake, sitting by the dying fire, processing the implications of what had happened. You're not normal. Hermione's voice was quiet but certain. She settled into the chair across from him, still wearing her ruined robes, still bearing smudges of troll blood that she hadn't bothered to clean. No one's normal, Hermione. Don't. Her eyes were fierce. Don't deflect. Don't lie. I know what I saw, Harry. That wasn't first-year magic. That wasn't even 7th-year magic. You moved like nothing human. And at the end, when you touched it. She trailed off, struggling to find words. Hadrian considered his options. Obliviate was possible. He could wipe her memory, restore her ignorance, preserve the mask. But memory charms were delicate things, easy to detect if someone knew what to look for. And Hermione was too intelligent to remain fooled forever. Killing her was also possible, but the thought never seriously formed. Hermione Granger was valuable. Her mind was extraordinary. Her loyalty, once given, would be absolute. She could be an asset. Maybe even an ally, but that required trust. And trust required truth. If I tell you, Hadrian said slowly, you can never speak of it. Not to Ron. Not to the professors. Not to anyone. This stays between us or it becomes dangerous for both of us. Hermione nodded immediately. I swear. You understand what you're swearing? This isn't a school secret. This is life and death. I understand. She leaned forward, intensity radiating from every line of her body. Harry, who are you? So he told her, not everything. Not Madara's true history, not the dimensional travel, not the deeper plans he was still formulating. But the broad strokes, his years with the Dursleys, his rescue by a man who saw his potential, the training that had transformed a broken child into something else entirely. My name isn't Harry Potter, he finished. Not really. Harry Potter was a victim. A symbol. Something for other people to use. He met her eyes. I'm Hadrian Uchiha. And I'm going to destroy everyone who thought they could control me. Hermione was silent for a long moment. That's insane, she said finally. That's absolutely, completely insane. A pause. I believe you. Why? Because it's the only explanation that fits. Because you're nothing like what the books describe. Because, she smiled, sudden and fierce, I've been watching you since the train. You're always performing. Always calculating. Normal people don't do that. But someone who was raised to be a weapon. Someone who's planning something enormous. That person would. You're not afraid. I'm terrified. She laughed, the sound slightly hysterical. But I'm also fascinated. And maybe a little relieved. I thought I was going mad, seeing things that weren't there. Knowing you're actually that good makes me feel less crazy. Hadrian studied her. The fierce intelligence. The determination. The complete lack of the submissive fear that most people showed when confronted with power. You want to be part of this. I want to be part of something. Something bigger than grades and tests and proving I belong. Her voice dropped. The magical world thinks people like me, Muggleborns, are lesser. Inferior. They'd never say it to our faces, but I've read enough to know. I don't want to spend my life fighting to be accepted by people who hate me for my blood. And you think I offer an alternative? I think you're going to change everything. I want to be there when you do. Hadrian made his decision. Then pay attention, he said. Because your education just got a lot more interesting. The months that followed were transformative. On the surface, nothing changed. Hadrian continued his performance as mediocre Harry Potter, struggling with coursework, making friends, being the humble hero everyone expected. Ron remained oblivious, happy to have a famous best mate who didn't act superior. The professors saw what they wanted to see, but beneath the surface, Hermione was learning. Hadrian couldn't teach her everything. Some techniques required years of physical conditioning, and others demanded magical abilities she simply didn't possess. But he could teach her to think. To plan. To see patterns in chaos and opportunities in obstacles. The wizarding world is stagnant, he explained during one of their late-night sessions. They've had the same government, the same prejudices, the same social structure for centuries. Nothing changes because nothing can change. The people in power have no incentive to reform, and the people without power have no tools to force them. So you're going to, what? Stage a revolution. Eventually. But not yet. First, I need to understand the system completely. Map every faction, every alliance, every pressure point. Know who can be bought, who can be threatened, who can be convinced. He smiled. You're going to help with that. How? By being exactly what everyone expects, a brilliant Muggleborn desperately trying to prove herself. The pureblood families will underestimate you. They'll speak freely around someone they consider beneath notice. And you'll remember everything they say. Hermione's eyes gleamed with understanding. I'm your spy. You're my partner. Spies are disposable. You're not. She flushed slightly at that, the first genuine compliment Hadrian had ever given her. But her voice was steady when she responded. What do you need me to do? For now. Keep your eyes open. Build relationships. Make yourself useful to the right people, professors, older students, anyone who might have information worth having. And keep practicing what I've taught you. The mental shields especially. Because of Dumbledore. Because of everyone. In this world, your thoughts are never truly private unless you make them so. I need you protected before you're exposed. The training continued. Hermione's occlumency shields were basic but functional within weeks. She had the focus and discipline that the art required. Her analytical abilities sharpened further as Hadrian challenged her with increasingly complex scenarios, and slowly, carefully, Hadrian began building the foundation of something larger. Christmas break brought an unexpected gift, the castle nearly empty. Most students went home for the holidays. Ron had invited Hadrian to the burrow, but Hadrian declined, too much exposure to adult Weasleys who might ask uncomfortable questions. Hermione returned to her Muggle parents, taking with her a stack of assigned readings and instructions to practice her shields daily. Hadrian had Hogwarts almost to himself. The snake network had expanded dramatically over the term. Dozens of serpents now reported to him regularly, creating a surveillance system that covered most of the castle's occupied areas. Through their eyes, Hadrian had learned things no student should know. Snape's late-night meetings with Dumbledore. The arguments they had about Harry Potter's placement, his progress, his potential. The headmaster's insistence that everything was proceeding according to plan. McGonagall's private concerns about a student she sensed was hiding something. Her recommendation to bring in specialists. Dumbledore's gentle but firm refusal. Quirrell's midnight visits to the third-floor corridor. The muffled sounds of conversation with something, that sometimes drifted from beneath his turban. That last piece of information was most valuable. Whatever lurked behind the trapdoor, Quirrell wanted it. And whatever possessed Quirrell, Hadrian was increasingly certain it was a possession, wanted it too. On Christmas night, Hadrian decided to investigate. The third-floor corridor was warded, but the wards were designed to repel curious students, not trained infiltrators. Hadrian bypassed them with contemptuous ease, slipping through the forbidden door like a shadow. Fluffy was asleep. A harp played softly in the corner. Someone had been here recently, and they'd known the dog's weakness. The trapdoor stood open, darkness yawning below. Hadrian dropped through. The fall was longer than expected, but he landed on something soft. Devil's snare, he recognized from herbology, already wrapping tendrils around his limbs. Fire solved that problem quickly enough. The next chamber held flying keys and a broomstick. Then a giant chess set. Then a troll, thankfully already unconscious. Then a room full of potions and a logic puzzle that Hermione could have solved in seconds. Finally, a mirror. It stood alone in the last chamber, tall and ornate, with an inscription carved across its frame, Eris stra eru oit ube kafru oit on wosi. Hadrian approached cautiously. The mirror radiated powerful magic, enchantments layered upon enchantments, centuries of accumulated power focused on a single purpose. Whatever this was, it was important that he looked into the glass. His reflection stared back. But it wasn't quite him. The reflection stood taller, older, draped in the formal robes of a lord. Madara stood beside him, alive and proud, looking at his son with unconcealed approval. Behind them stretched an army, wizards and shinobi standing together, power beyond imagining gathered under a single banner. The deepest desire of your heart, Hadrian realized. That was what the mirror showed. The inscription, read backward, I show not your face but your heart's desire. Interesting. Useful. And potentially dangerous. If the mirror showed desires, it could be used against people. Make them stare at their dreams until reality seemed pale by comparison. A weapon of psychological warfare, disguised as a decorative antique, but that wasn't its primary purpose. Not here. Not hidden behind all these obstacles. Hadrian examined the mirror more closely. The frame contained subtle enchantments he hadn't noticed at first, transfer spells, containment wards, the kind of magic used to store objects in extradimensional pockets. The mirror was a vault. And somewhere inside it, protected by the requirement that only someone who wanted the contents but didn't want to use them could access it. Ah. Mr. Potter. I wondered when you might visit. Hadrian spun, hand raised to strike. Dumbledore stood in the doorway, robes of festive red and green, expression mild and curious. He looked entirely unsurprised to find a student in his secret vault. Or should I say, the headmaster continued, Mr. Uchiha. Hadrian's blood went cold. Don't look so alarmed. Dumbledore moved forward, somehow crossing the room without seeming to rush. I've known since the moment you arrived. Did you truly think your guardian's interference would go unnoticed? The magical signature at Privet Drive was quite distinctive. The mask had shattered. Completely, irrevocably shattered. Hadrian shifted into a combat stance, magic gathering at his fingertips. If you know who I am, you know I can hurt you. Oh, I don't doubt it. Dumbledore smiled, and it wasn't the grandfatherly expression he showed to students. This was something older, sharper, far more dangerous. Your friend Madara has taught you well. But I did not come here to fight, Harry. I came to talk. About what? About the future. About what you're planning. About why I placed you with the Dursleys, and why, despite what you believe, I am not your enemy. You left me to be abused. For years. Yes. No denial, no justification, just acknowledgement. And I would do it again. Hadrian's control cracked. Fire erupted from his palm, a killing blow aimed directly at Dumbledore's heart. The headmaster's wand moved faster than sight. The fire bent around him, redirected, absorbed into a protective shield that glittered like captured starlight. "I am 150 years old," Dumbledore said calmly. "I have fought dark wizards since before your grandfather was born. You are talented, Harry. Perhaps the most talented student to ever walk these halls. But you are not yet ready to defeat me." The fire died. Hadrian's hand dropped to his side. "Then why tell me?" His voice was steady despite the fear coiling in his chest. "Why not just erase the problem?" "Because I need you. The wizarding world needs you." Dumbledore's eyes lost their twinkle, becoming something ancient and tired. "Voldemort is not dead, Harry. He lingers on the edge of existence, waiting to return. And when he does, and he will return, you are the only one who can stop him permanently." "The prophecy. You know of it?" "I know one exists. I don't know its contents." Dumbledore studied him for a long moment. "You have earned some truths, I think." "Very well." He took a breath. "The one with the power to vanquish the Dark Lord approaches, born to those who have thrice defied him, born as the 7th month dies. And the Dark Lord will mark him as his equal, but he will have power the Dark Lord knows not. And either must die at the hand of the other, for neither can live while the other survives." The words hung in the air. Prophecy. Destiny. An inescapable fate written before he was ever born. "You're saying I have to kill him." "I'm saying you're the only one who can. The power Voldemort knows not, whatever your guardian has taught you, whatever abilities you've developed, they exist for a reason. The universe itself has deemed you the weapon to end this war." "And the Dursleys? How does torturing a child factor into your grand plan?" "Blood magic." Dumbledore's voice carried genuine regret, or at least an excellent imitation of it. "Your mother's sacrifice created protections that required blood relatives to maintain. As long as you lived with Petunia, as long as you could call her house home, Voldemort's followers could not find you. The cost was high. I knew that. I accept the guilt of it. But you lived, Harry. You survived long enough for someone to rescue you and make you strong. You're saying you planned this? Counted on someone taking me away? I hoped for it. Prepared contingencies in case it didn't happen." Dumbledore smiled sadly. "I am a manipulator, Harry. I use people, their strengths, their weaknesses, their loves and hates, to achieve outcomes I believe necessary. I do not apologize for this. I merely acknowledge it. And I tell you now so that you can decide, with full knowledge, whether to work with me or against me." Hadrian's mind raced. Everything Dumbledore said could be lies. Probably was lies, at least in part. But there was truth mixed in, enough truth to make the picture complicated. "What do you want from me?" "For now. Continue your education. Learn what Hogwarts has to teach. Grow stronger." Dumbledore's eyes gleamed. "And when the time comes, when Voldemort makes his move, be ready to stop him. And if I refuse? Then I will do what I must to protect this world. With or without your cooperation." The threat was mild but unmistakable. "But I would prefer alliance, Harry. Your father, your adopted father, taught you to see enemies everywhere. I understand why. But not everyone who stands in your way is an obstacle to be destroyed. Some of us are simply playing a different game." The standoff held for a long moment, then Hadrian nodded slowly. "I'll think about it. That is all I ask." Dumbledore turned toward the door, pausing at the threshold. "Oh, and Harry. The mirror contains the Philosopher's Stone. An alchemical creation capable of producing the elixir of life. Voldemort, through his servant Quirrell, is attempting to steal it. I would appreciate if you allowed me to handle that particular problem." "You know about Quirrell." "I know many things. including what lurks beneath his turban. Dumbledore's smile was razor-sharp. Sleep well, Harry. We will speak again. He vanished. Hadrian stood alone in the mirror chamber, staring at his reflection, still showing that impossible future, that dream of power and family and everything he'd ever wanted. The game had changed, everything had changed, and he had no idea what to do next. The letter to Madara was 3 pages long. Hadrian wrote it in, using a cipher they developed specifically for sensitive communications. He detailed everything: the troll fight, Hermione's recruitment, Dumbledore's revelation. Every piece of information, every implication, every uncertainty. The response came 2 days later: continue as planned. Dumbledore's knowledge changes tactics, not strategy. He needs you, which gives you leverage. Use it. Build your strength. Trust no one completely, including me. The time approaches when you will stand alone. Be ready. MPS. I am proud of you. Hadrian read those last 5 words a dozen times, then he burned the letter and went back to pretending to be Harry Potter. The rest of the year passed in a blur. Quirrell made his move on the final night of term, exactly as Dumbledore had predicted. The confrontation in the mirror chamber was messy. Quirrell died, the thing possessing him fled, the stone was apparently destroyed to prevent future theft. Hadrian wasn't there. He'd received a subtle suggestion from Dumbledore to stay away, and he'd followed it. Not because he trusted the headmaster, but because intervening would reveal more of his capabilities than he wanted known. Let Dumbledore handle Voldemort's shade. Let the adults believe the crisis was resolved. The real war was just beginning. On the train home, Hadrian sat with Ron and Hermione, watching the countryside roll past. Mental year, wasn't it? Ron was already eating chocolate frogs, completely recovered from the stress of final exams. Trolls and 3-headed dogs and that whole thing with the stone. Think next year will be quieter? Probably not, Hermione said dryly. She caught Hadrian's eye, a subtle acknowledgement of everything they'd discussed in private. Trouble seems to follow some people. Lucky us, having Harry around then. Ron grinned. Life's never boring with the boy who lived, right? Hadrian smiled his Harry Potter smile. Right. But beneath the mask, Hadrian Uchiha was planning. Dumbledore knew about him. Wanted to use him. Saw him as a weapon to be aimed at Voldemort and discarded afterward. Madara had said to use that knowledge. Turn the manipulators' games back on themselves. Become indispensable, then irreplaceable, then unstoppable. The first year was over, the real education was about to begin. The cottage was exactly as he'd left it. Madara waited at the door, arms crossed, expression unreadable. He looked the same as always, ageless, powerful, carrying the weight of centuries in eyes that had seen too much. Hadrian stopped 10 feet away. Suddenly, after all those months of masks and performances, he didn't know what to say. You've grown, Madara observed. Not just physically. I had to. The situation, I know. I read your letters. Madara's expression softened, just slightly. You did well, Hadrian. Better than I could have hoped. Facing Dumbledore, turning his knowledge into opportunity, that took courage. I was terrified. Of course you were. Fear is not weakness. Acting despite fear, that is strength. Madara moved forward, closing the distance between them. You have proven yourself, my son. This summer, we begin the next phase of your training. What does that involve? Madara smiled. It was not a reassuring expression. Everything I have held back. The techniques I deemed too dangerous for a child. The knowledge that makes enemies into corpses and allies into fanatics. The power that will let you stand against gods and win. He placed a hand on Hadrian's shoulder. Welcome home, Hadrian Uchiha. Welcome to war. Chapter 3, The Return of a Ghost. The killing curse missed Hadrian's head by 3 inches. He was already moving before the green light finished forming, instinct screaming danger as Madara's wand tracked his movement across the training ground. Another curse followed the first, not Avada Kedavra this time, something that crackled with contained lightning, and Hadrian twisted sideways, feeling the spell's heat sear the air where his torso had been. Too slow. Madara's voice carried no emotion. Again. 3 months of summer training had pushed Hadrian past every limit he thought he had. Madara had stopped holding back. The techniques he deemed too dangerous for a child turned out to be exactly that, curses that could kill with a touch, combat methods designed for wars where survival was measured in seconds, mental disciplines that required skirting the edge of madness to master. Hadrian had almost died 6 times. He'd lost count of the injuries that he'd never felt more alive. Your footwork is sloppy. Madara circled him, wand still raised, eyes cataloging every flaw. You favor your right side when dodging. An observant opponent would exploit that. Hard to focus on footwork when you're throwing unforgivables at me. The Dark Lord will not pause to let you find your footing. Neither will I. Another curse, faster this time. Hadrian barely evaded. Your enemies will use every advantage. Your only counter is to have no weaknesses they can exploit. The training session continued for another hour. By the end, Hadrian was bleeding from a dozen small wounds, his magical reserves nearly depleted, his body screaming for rest. Madara looked completely fresh. Acceptable, the legendary shinobi said finally. Your combat instincts have improved. Your spellcasting speed approaches adequacy. But you still think like a wizard, relying on magic for everything, forgetting the body is also a weapon. I've been practicing the physical techniques, not enough. A shinobi fights with everything, hands, feet, environment, psychology. Your magic should enhance your combat abilities, not replace them. Madara's eyes narrowed. Tomorrow, we begin integration training. You will learn to fight without pausing to choose between physical and magical options. The choice must be automatic. Instant. Invisible. Hadrian nodded, too exhausted to argue. What about tonight? Tonight, we discuss what you learned about the castle's defenses. I want detailed layouts of every ward boundary you identified. I mapped most of them. Hogwarts has at least 7 distinct ward layers, 7 that you noticed. There are likely more. Madara turned toward the cottage, gesturing for Hadrian to follow. Ancient buildings accumulate protections over centuries. Some become so integrated with the structure that they're nearly undetectable. You must learn to sense what isn't obvious. They walked in comfortable silence. The Scottish Highlands stretched around them, endless green and grey under a summer sky that never quite committed to either sunshine or rain. 3 years in this isolation had made the landscape familiar, almost beloved. The Malfoy boy, Madara said abruptly. You mentioned him in your letters. What is your assessment? Arrogant. Entitled. Desperate for his father's approval. Hadrian considered. Potentially useful, if properly motivated. His family has connections throughout pureblood society. And he's not stupid, just undisciplined. Could you turn him? Possibly. He wants to be important. Wants to be seen as powerful. If I offered him a path to significance that didn't require groveling to his father or the Dark Lord's memory. Hadrian shrugged. It would take time. And careful handling. Begin that process this year. The Malfoys have resources we may need later. You want me to befriend Draco Malfoy? I want you to own Draco Malfoy. Madara's voice was cold. Friendship is a luxury. Loyalty can be manufactured. Give him what he craves, respect, importance, the illusion of partnership, and he will follow you anywhere. Hadrian thought about that. The manipulation felt distasteful, but he couldn't argue with the logic. Draco was positioned perfectly, inside Slytherin, connected to Death Eater families, desperate enough to be exploitable. Turning him would open doors that would otherwise require years of careful maneuvering. What about Dumbledore? He knows about me now. He'll be watching. Let him watch. Madara smiled thinly. Dumbledore's weakness is his certainty. He believes he understands you, a talented child being used by a dangerous influence. He will attempt to save you from me. To show you the error of your ways. To bring you back into his fold. And I should let him think it's working. You should give him hope. Small concessions. Moments of apparent doubt. Make him believe his gentle wisdom is winning you over. Madara's smile sharpened. A man convinced of his own victory stops looking for threats. By the time Dumbledore realizes his mistake, it will be far too late. The cottage door opened onto warmth and the smell of cooking food. Madara had somehow found time to prepare dinner despite the brutal training session, one of many small kindnesses that continually surprised Hadrian. The legendary shinobi who had tried to enslave the world also made excellent stew. Eat. Rest. Tomorrow we continue. Madara settled into his chair by the fire, looking suddenly old in the flickering light. The second year will be harder than the first. Voldemort's servants are stirring. The signs are subtle but unmistakable. He is preparing something. Already? I thought he was weakened by what happened with Quirrell. Weakened, not destroyed. A spirit as powerful as the Dark Lord does not surrender easily. He will find another vessel, another path to resurrection. And when he does, you must be ready. Hadrian ate his dinner in thoughtful silence. The food was good, it was always good, but his mind was elsewhere. Planning. Calculating. Running scenarios. Father. Madara looked up, and the title still seemed to catch him off guard, even after all these years. Yes. When Voldemort returns, when I have to face him for real, will I be strong enough? The question hung in the air. Madara didn't answer immediately, and that hesitation told Hadrian more than words could. You will be stronger than any wizard alive, Madara said finally. Perhaps stronger than any wizard who has ever lived. But Voldemort is no ordinary enemy. He has cheated death, splintered his soul, accumulated decades of dark knowledge. Raw power may not be enough. Then what will be? Intelligence. Patience. The willingness to do what others cannot. Madara met his eyes. You must be harder than he is, Hadrian. More ruthless. More determined. When the moment comes, you cannot hesitate. You cannot show mercy. You must destroy him so completely that not even his spirit survives. I can do that. I know you can. Madara's expression softened. That is what frightens me. Platform 9 3/4 was chaos. Hadrian navigated the crowds with practiced ease, trunk floating behind him on a subtle levitation charm. He'd arrived early deliberately, before the Weasleys, before most families, to observe and position himself. The platform had changed since last year. Or maybe he had changed, and was only now seeing what had always been there. The subtle divisions between old families and new arrivals. The way pureblood children clustered together while Muggleborns stood uncertain at the edges. The ministry officials trying to look casual as they scanned faces for persons of interest. One of those officials was definitely watching him. Hadrian filed that away and continued to the train. His compartment from last year was empty, and he claimed it with a ward that would discourage interruption. Nothing dramatic, just a gentle suggestion that the space was already occupied, that he had letters to read. Hermione had written faithfully all summer, updating him on her practice with occlumency shields, her research into pureblood politics, her careful cultivation of contacts among her Muggleborn peers. She was building something, a network of overlooked students who might prove useful when the time came. The Greengrass girl wrote to me, one letter reported. Daphne said she'd heard I was friends with you and wanted to establish communication. Very formal, very Slytherin. I think she's fishing for information. What should I tell her? Hadrian had responded with careful instructions. Let Daphne think Hermione was simply a loyal friend, protective of Harry Potter's reputation. Provide small truths wrapped in misdirection. Build a relationship without revealing anything substantive. The game within the game within the game, the compartment door slid open, Daphne Greengrass stood there, impeccable in new robes that probably cost more than most families' annual income. Her ice-blue eyes swept the space, noted the subtle ward, and locked onto Hadrian with predatory interest. Potter. I wondered where you'd disappeared to. Greengrass. Hadrian didn't stand, but he gestured to the seat across from him. Looking for someone? Found him. She settled into the offered seat with serpentine grace, crossing her legs precisely. We have unfinished business. Do we? You remember our conversation last year? The offer I made. Hadrian remembered perfectly. When you're ready to stop pretending to be harmless, let me know. He'd spent months wondering about her angle, her motivation, what she actually wanted. I remember you being cryptic and then disappearing. Hard to have a business relationship with someone who won't explain what they're selling. Daphne's lips curved. Fair. Allow me to be more direct. She leaned forward slightly. The Greengrass family is neutral. We've maintained that neutrality through 2 wizarding wars by being useful to all sides and threatening to none. It's a delicate position, and my father maintains it through careful cultivation of options. Options? Alliances that don't require public commitment. Relationships that provide value without demanding loyalty. Her eyes glittered. I am one of those options, Potter. My father has positioned me to build connections with the next generation of power. Connections that might become valuable when the current order shifts. And you think I'm worth cultivating? I think you're the most interesting variable in a very predictable landscape. She echoed her words from last year deliberately. The boy who lived, trained by an unknown guardian, more dangerous than anyone realizes, playing a game that I haven't fully decoded. A pause. I want to know what you're planning. And I want to help. Why? Because neutrality is a slow death. The admission seemed to cost her something. My family survives, but we don't matter. We're furniture, useful, decorative, ultimately replaceable. I don't want to be furniture, Potter. I want to be a player. Hadrian studied her. The calculation was obvious, she was offering herself as an asset in exchange for access to something bigger. Standard ambitious Slytherin maneuvering, but there was something else. Something in the way she held herself, the carefully controlled tension in her shoulders. Daphne Greengrass wasn't just ambitious. She was desperate. What happens if your father finds out you're making independent arrangements? The mask flickered. That's my problem to manage. Is it? Because if I bring you in, if I let you see what I'm actually doing, your family complications become my complications. That's a significant risk for uncertain reward. Then let me prove my value. Daphne's voice hardened. Give me a task. Something meaningful. If I succeed, you have evidence that I'm worth the investment. If I fail, you've lost nothing, I'll have no leverage against you, and you can cut me loose without consequence. It was a reasonable proposal. Madara would approve of the structure, low risk, potential high reward, commitment from the other party without corresponding commitment from Hadrian. All right. Hadrian let the agreement hang for a moment before continuing. There's a diary. Black, leather-bound, belonging to someone who died 50 years ago. I have reason to believe it's going to appear at Hogwarts this year. I don't know how, and I don't know who will receive it. Find it. Report to me. Don't touch it, don't interact with it, don't let anyone know you're looking. Daphne's eyes narrowed. You want me to find a book? I want you to find a weapon disguised as a book. One that could cause significant harm if it reaches the wrong hands. Hadrian held her gaze. This is a test of your discretion, your investigative ability, and your judgment. The diary is dangerous, genuinely dangerous. If you find it and decide to investigate on your own, you will likely die. I'm telling you this not as a threat but as a warning. And if I succeed? Then we talk about partnership. Real partnership. Hadrian smiled, and it wasn't the harmless Harry Potter smile. Do we have a deal? Daphne considered. Then she extended her hand. Deal. They shook, the compartment door opened again. Harry. Ron Weasley's face split into an enormous grin as he spotted his friend. Been looking everywhere for, he noticed Daphne, and his expression shifted to confusion. What are you doing here, Greengrass? Leaving. Daphne rose smoothly, collecting herself as if nothing unusual had occurred. Potter was just giving me directions to the prefect carriage. I got turned around. She swept out before Ron could ask more questions. The redhead watched her go with transparent suspicion. Since when are you friends with Slytherins? Since never. Hadrian shrugged, projecting casual indifference. She really was just lost. Couldn't exactly kick her out, could I? Could have tried. Ron settled into the vacated seat, pulling out a squashed sandwich from his pocket. Mum sent food. Want half? Thanks. They ate in comfortable silence as the platform filled with returning students. Hermione appeared eventually, loaded down with books and looking frazzled, and the compartment began to feel like home. Hadrian let the familiar routine wash over him. Ron's complaints about summer chores. Hermione's excitement about advanced coursework. The easy rhythm of friendship that required no masks, no calculations, no constant assessment that he wasn't pretending, exactly. The affection for his friends was genuine. But even now, part of him was always watching. Always planning. Always preparing for the moment when comfort would have to be sacrificed for necessity. The train pulled out of the station, second year had begun, the sorting ceremony passed without incident. New first years were divided into houses, the usual warnings were issued, and the feast was as excessive as Hadrian remembered. He ate moderately, spoke when spoken to, and devoted most of his attention to cataloging changes in the staff table. Dumbledore looked the same, ancient, twinkling, radiating grandfatherly wisdom like a weapon. McGonagall was stern as ever. Snape's glare had intensified over the summer, though whether that reflected specific hostility toward Hadrian or general misanthropy was unclear. The new defense against the dark arts professor was memorable. Gilderoy Lockhart smiled at the assembled students like he was posing for a photograph. Which, given his apparent obsession with self-promotion, he probably was. The man's robes were peacock blue. His hair was perfect. His teeth gleamed with what had to be magical enhancement. Hadrian had read his books. All 7 of them, as required for second-year curriculum. They were fascinating, not because of the content, which was transparently exaggerated if not outright fabricated, but because of what they revealed about their author. Lockhart was a fraud. The adventures he claimed couldn't have happened as described, the magical theory was wrong, the timelines didn't match, and several of his supposed locations didn't exist. Someone had done the deeds he took CR for, which meant Lockhart had either incredible luck in avoiding exposure, or powerful skills in covering his tracks. Neither option suggested incompetence. Both suggested danger. What do you think of him? Hermione whispered, following Hadrian's gaze to the staff table. I think he's going to be very interesting. Hadrian kept his voice low, mindful of the students around them. Do some research. Find inconsistencies in his published accounts. Quietly. Already started. Hermione's smile was sharp. There's a woman mentioned in Wanderings with Werewolves, supposedly the village elder who sought his help. I found her obituary. She died 3 years before the book claims the encounter occurred. Good. Keep digging. The feast concluded. Students filed out toward their dormitories. Hadrian separated from Ron and Hermione at the Gryffindor portrait, claiming fatigue, and doubled back through a servant's passage to the 3rd floor that he needed to check the corridor. Whatever Dumbledore had done with the defenses protecting the stone, they'd been dismantled. The 3-headed dog was gone. The trapdoor had been sealed. The entire corridor felt empty in a way that went beyond mere vacancy, but something lingered. A trace. A magical residue that tickled Hadrian's senses in an unpleasant way that he knelt, pressing his palm to the floor. Closed his eyes. Let his magic reach out, feeling for whatever had left its mark cold. Hungry. Patient, the impression was faint but unmistakable. Something had passed through here, something that fed on life and left winter in its wake. Not a ghost, not a curse, but something adjacent to both. Voldemort's new plan was already in motion. Hadrian filed the information away and retreated to the dormitory. He needed to Madara, and the delivery would require his snake network. War was coming. The castle, for all its ancient protections, had no idea. Defense against the dark arts with Lockhart was exactly as bad as Hadrian had expected. Welcome to Defense Against the Dark Arts. The professor beamed at them from behind a desk covered in portraits of himself. I see you've all purchased my complete works. Splendid. Now, I know what you're thinking, how can this one man have accomplished so much? The answer, dear students, is talent. Natural, extraordinary, world-renowned talent. Ron made a gagging noise that he failed to disguise as a cough. For today's lesson, I thought we'd start with something practical. Lockhart produced a covered cage, setting it on his desk with dramatic flourish. Can anyone guess what's in here? Anyone at all? No one volunteered. No. Then let me enlighten you. He whipped off the cover. Freshly caught Cornish pixies. The pixies were small, electric blue, and looked largely harmless. They also looked extremely annoyed at being trapped. Pixies. Seamus Finnegan sounded incredulous. They're not dangerous, are they? Dangerous? Ha! Lockhart laughed like that was the funniest thing he'd ever heard. These little creatures have been known to cause absolute chaos when properly motivated. Let's see how you handle them. He opened the cage. What followed was not so much chaos as comedy. The pixies swarmed out, grabbing anything not nailed down, lifting students by their ears, and generally demonstrating why keeping hostile magical creatures in an enclosed space was monumentally stupid. Lockhart tried exactly one spell, Pescapixie Pesternemy, which did nothing, before fleeing to his office and leaving the students to deal with the mess. Hermione eventually immobilized the pixies with a freezing charm. Hadrian helped herd them back into the cage. Ron spent most of the time hiding under his desk. What was that? Neville Longbottom looked genuinely traumatized, which was fair given that two pixies had dragged him to the ceiling by his ears. What kind of lesson was that supposed to be? The kind where we learn our professor is completely useless, Dean Thomas muttered. Don't say that too loudly, Hadrian advised. Lockhart has powerful friends. Getting on his bad side could cause problems. How do you know he has powerful friends? Because someone this incompetent wouldn't have survived this long without protection. Hadrian kept his voice mild. Which means he's either not as incompetent as he seems, or someone is covering for him. Either way, it's best to keep our opinions private. The lesson ended. Students dispersed, grumbling about wasted time and ruined robes. Hermione fell into step beside Hadrian as they headed to lunch. You don't think he's just an idiot? I think he's something much more dangerous. Hadrian kept his eyes forward, watching the corridor traffic. An idiot wouldn't have gotten this position. Dumbledore selected him specifically, either because he knows something we don't, or because he wants something specific from Lockhart. Maybe he just couldn't find anyone else. The position is cursed. Everyone knows that. But there are still qualified candidates, retired Aurors, experienced duelers, experts from the continent. Lockhart isn't any of those things. Which means Dumbledore chose him for a reason that isn't about teaching defense. Hermione was quiet for a moment. You think Dumbledore is testing something? Or preparing something? Or distracting from something? Hadrian smiled thinly. The headmaster plays games within games. Lockhart is a piece on his board. We just need to figure out what move he's setting up. Sometimes I forget how paranoid you are. I prefer appropriately cautious. Paranoia suggests the threats aren't real. They reached the Great Hall, splitting to join their respective friend groups. Hadrian took his usual seat beside Ron, who was already complaining about the morning's disaster to anyone who would listen. Absolute nutter, that one. Pixies. Who lets pixies loose in a classroom? Someone who wants to see how we handle unexpected threats. Hadrian offered. Or someone who's mental. My money's on mental. Lunch was shepherd's pie and treacle tart. Hadrian ate mechanically, attention divided between Ron's ongoing rant and a message that had arrived via house elf that morning: the diary has entered the castle. I tracked it to a student, first year, Gryffindor. Female. Approach with extreme caution. Daphne had come through faster than expected. The diary, Voldemort's Horcrux, if Hadrian's research was correct, was already here. Already finding a victim. First year Gryffindor. Female. He ran through the mental list of new students. There weren't many girls in Gryffindor's first year class. The most obvious candidate was, Ginny's been acting strange lately. Hadrian's attention snapped to Ron. What? My sister. Ginny. Ron gestured vaguely toward the end of the table, where a small red-headed girl sat alone, not eating, staring at nothing. She was so excited about Hogwarts all summer. Talked about nothing else. But since we got here, she's been weird. Distant. Won't talk to anyone. Maybe she's just adjusting. First year is overwhelming. Yeah, maybe. Ron didn't sound convinced. Mom made me promise to look out for her, but every time I try to check on her, she runs away. It's like she's hiding something. Hadrian looked at Ginny Weasley. The youngest of 7 children, raised on stories of Harry Potter, probably spent her whole life dreaming about meeting the boy who lived, the perfect target for a magical artifact that fed on emotions and ambitions. I'll talk to her, Hadrian said. Sometimes it's easier to open up to someone who isn't family. Would you? That'd be brilliant, mate. She's always been a bit, Ron made a gesture that could mean anything, about you. Bit of a fan, you know. Might actually listen if it's you. I'll see what I can do. After lunch, Hadrian waited until Ginny started to leave, then intercepted her at the Great Hall doors. She froze when she saw him coming, going pale and then red in rapid succession. Ginny, right? Ron's sister? Why yes. Her voice was barely audible. I mean, Harry Potter. You know who you are. I do, generally. He smiled, warm and reassuring, the perfect Harry Potter expression. Mind if we talk for a minute? Ron's worried about you. The color drained from her face. He shouldn't be. I'm fine. Are you? Hadrian stepped closer, lowering his voice. Because you look exhausted. And scared. And like you're carrying something too heavy for anyone to carry alone. Ginny's eyes welled with tears. For a moment, Hadrian thought she might actually tell him, might confess about the diary, about whatever was happening to her, about the burden that was clearly crushing her, then her expression shut down. I said I'm fine. Her voice was different now. Colder. More controlled. Leave me alone, Potter. She pushed past him and fled down the corridor. Hadrian watched her go, calculating. That shift in personality, from overwhelmed child to cold dismissal, wasn't natural. Something had taken control. Something that recognized Hadrian as a threat and had forced Ginny to retreat. The diary was protecting itself, which meant it was aware. Sentient. Actively manipulating its victim rather than simply draining her. Tom Riddle's Horcrux was every bit as dangerous as Madara had warned. Hadrian needed to move faster. The first attack came 2 weeks later. Hadrian was in the library when the screaming started. By the time he reached the scene, a crowd had already gathered around Mrs. Norris, Filch's cat, hung from a torch bracket, body rigid and staring, and on the wall, written in what looked like blood, "The Chamber of Secrets has been opened." Enemies of the heir, beware. The crowd parted as Dumbledore arrived, followed by the other heads of house. The headmaster examined the cat, the message, the water spreading across the floor from a nearby bathroom. "She is not dead," Dumbledore announced. "Merely petrified. Professor Sprout's mandrakes will provide a restorative, when they mature." Hadrian barely heard the rest. He was too busy watching the faces around him: Draco Malfoy, who looked far too pleased, Ginny Weasley, who looked ready to faint, the teachers, whose expressions ranged from concern to something darker. Snape's gaze found Hadrian's across the crowd. The message was clear: "We will speak later." The students were dismissed. The castle descended into whispered panic, and somewhere in the walls, something ancient stirred. The Chamber of Secrets is real. Snape's office was cold, dimly lit, and smelled of potions ingredients. Hadrian sat across from the potions master, keeping his expression carefully neutral. "Obviously," he said. "Do not play games with me, Potter." Snape's voice could have frozen fire. "I know what you are. Dumbledore's pet project. The secret weapon being shaped for future use. But I also know that you are hiding something significant, and I will discover what. With respect, Professor, you don't know anything about me. I know your father's arrogance. I know your mother's stubbornness." Snape leaned forward, dark eyes glittering. "And I know that whatever happened during your disappearance changed you into something else. Something dangerous. I survived. People find that threatening sometimes. You did more than survive. You became something Dumbledore didn't anticipate. Something that concerns him greatly, though he refuses to admit it." Snape's lips curved in something that wasn't quite a smile. "I find that interesting. What do you want, Professor?" "Information. The Chamber of Secrets was opened once before, 50 years ago. A student died. The creature responsible was never truly identified, though the official record claims a half-giant student named Rubeus Hagrid was responsible." "Hagrid. The groundskeeper?" "The same. He was expelled and forbidden to use magic. The death was attributed to a spider he was keeping as a pet." Snape's tone dripped skepticism. "I do not believe that explanation." "Neither do I." Hadrian met Snape's gaze. "Spiders don't petrify. They kill or they web. Whatever attacked Mrs. Norris has different capabilities entirely. Your deductive skills are adequate, at least." Snape stood, moving to a shelf lined with jars of dubious contents. "The creature is almost certainly a basilisk. King of serpents. Its gaze kills instantly, but indirect exposure, through a reflection or obstruction, causes petrification instead. And you're telling me this because? Because Dumbledore will not act decisively. He never does. He will wait and watch and gather information while the creature continues to hunt." Snape turned back, face shadowed. "I am telling you because you might actually do something about it. You want me to hunt a basilisk. I want the students protected. If that requires you to take initiative, then so be it." Snape's expression was unreadable. "You are capable of things beyond your years, Potter. I have suspected it since your first day here. Perhaps it is time to prove that suspicion correct." Hadrian considered the offer. Snape was clearly working his own angle, probably trying to position himself advantageously regardless of how the situation developed. But the information was valuable, and the tacit permission to act was even more so. "If I do this, if I find the chamber and deal with the basilisk, what do you offer in return?" "I will ensure your actions are not officially noticed. Dumbledore sees a great deal, but not everything. And the political cover of a head of house can be surprisingly useful. You're asking me to trust you. I am asking you to recognize mutual benefit." Snape's eyes were cold. "I do not like you, Potter. I will never like you. But I am not fool enough to let personal animosity override practical considerations." "Are you?" Hadrian smiled. No. No, I'm not. He rose to leave. At the door, he paused. "Professor. You said Riddle reported Hagrid, that's how you knew the details of the original incident." Snape went very still. "I said no such thing. You didn't have to. Tom Riddle was head boy when the chamber was opened. He received a special award for services to the school. And his diary just happens to be in the possession of a first-year student who's been acting strangely since term started." Hadrian met Snape's eyes. "You knew, didn't you? Before I said anything. You knew this was connected to the Dark Lord." The silence stretched. "Get out, Potter." Hadrian went. But he carried with him the confirmation he'd needed. Snape knew about the diary. Which meant Dumbledore knew about the diary. Which meant the headmaster was letting this situation develop deliberately. The game within the game within the game. 2 more attacks followed in rapid succession. Colin Creevey was found petrified in a corridor, his camera clutched to his face. The film inside was melted, the basilisk's gaze had burned through even the mechanical intermediary. Nearly headless Nick and Justin Finch-Fletchley were discovered together, Nick silvered and frozen, Justin rigid beside him. A ghost couldn't die, but it could apparently be petrified. The school descended into paranoia. Students traveled in groups. The corridors emptied after dark. Rumors spread like wildfire. The heir of Slytherin was among them, commanding an ancient monster, targeting Muggleborns for extinction, and the whispers increasingly pointed at Harry Potter. "They're saying you can talk to snakes." Hermione ambushed him after herbology, dragging him into an empty classroom. Her expression was somewhere between concerned and terrified. "Who's saying that?" "Everyone. Apparently there was an incident at the dueling club." Hadrian grimaced. The dueling club had been Lockhart's bright idea, predictably disastrous, and it had ended with Draco conjuring a snake and Hadrian instinctively telling it to back down. In Parseltongue. In front of half the school. "You actually can, then. Talk to snakes. It's a Hirari ability. The Gaunt family had it, they're Slytherin's descendants. Voldemort inherited it from them, and when he tried to kill me, some of his power transferred. Probably. Hermione absorbed this. So you're not the heir of Slytherin. I'm the heir of absolutely nothing. I just have an inconvenient magical ability that makes me look suspicious." Hadrian ran a hand through his hair. "This is actually useful, though. If people think I'm the heir, they'll focus on me instead of looking for the real culprit. You want to be a suspect? I want Ginny Weasley protected long enough for me to separate her from that diary." Hadrian's voice hardened. "Every moment of attention on me is a moment the diary isn't controlling her. A moment the basilisk isn't hunting. How do you know it's her? How do you know about the diary?" "I have sources." He met her eyes. "Do you trust me?" "You know I do." "Then trust that I'm handling this. The fewer people who know the details, the safer everyone is." Hermione nodded slowly. "What do you need me to do?" "Keep researching the basilisk. Find out how to kill it, where it might be nesting, any weaknesses we can exploit. And watch Ginny. Don't let her be alone if you can help it. The diary feeds on isolation." "I can do that. One more thing." Hadrian pulled a small mirror from his pocket, a communication device Madara had created, linked to a matching mirror at the cottage. "If anything happens to me, use this. Say, Uchiha, and speak clearly. My father will respond." Hermione took the mirror with trembling hands. "You think something might happen to you?" "I think I'm about to hunt a 1,000-year-old monster in the basement of a castle that doesn't want me to find it." Hadrian smiled grimly. "Preparation for contingencies isn't pessimism. It's good strategy. Finding the Chamber of Secrets required patience, resources, and a small army of snakes. The castle's serpent network had grown substantially since Hadrian's first year. Snakes nested in every crack and cranny, their cold intelligence perfectly suited to mapping the spaces between walls. When Hadrian asked them to find the largest underground cavity in Hogwarts, they slithered into the depths with single-minded purpose. 3 days later, Sasha returned with the answer. Below the castle, she hissed, curling around Hadrian's wrist in the privacy of his bed's drawn curtains. A great cavern. Water and stone and bones. And something else. Something that sleeps but does not dream. Something ancient. Can you show me the way? Many paths. Some through pipes too small for humans. One through a room that smells of ghosts and tears, the bathroom where Mrs. Norris was found. The one that nobody used because moaning Myrtle's constant weeping made it unbearable. Hadrian smiled. Perfect. He waited until midnight. The castle was quiet, the corridors empty, the only sounds the distant creaking of magical architecture settling into sleep. Hadrian moved through shadows like one of them, years of Madara's training making him functionally invisible to casual observation. The bathroom was dark and damp, Myrtle nowhere to be seen. The sink stood in a circle, old-fashioned and slightly grimy, unremarkable except for one, the one with a tiny snake etched into the copper tap. Open, Hadrian commanded in Parseltongue. The sink dropped into the floor. A pipe large enough for a human to slide through gaped behind it, descending into blackness. Hadrian dropped in without hesitation. The slide was long, twisting, depositing him eventually in a tunnel large enough to drive a car through. The floor was littered with small bones, rats, probably, though some looked disturbingly human-sized. The walls were wet, covered in slime that glowed faintly with bioluminescence, and ahead, waiting in the darkness, he felt it. The presence. The cold, ancient intelligence that had slumbered beneath Hogwarts for a millennium. The basilisk was awake. Who enters? The voice was vast, resonant, filling the tunnel without echoing. Hadrian stopped walking, keeping his eyes fixed on the ground. A speaker, he responded. One who knows the old tongue, the master's tongue. The presence shifted, massive coils sliding against stone somewhere in the darkness. You are not the master. The master is small. Weak. Bound to ink and paper, the diary, the master commands. I obey. A pause. You smell different. Powerful. Old blood and fire and something else. Something that does not belong in this world. I am Hadrian Uchiha. He let power trickle into his voice, a subtle assertion of dominance. I serve no master but myself. Silence. Then, slowly, a laugh, deep and grinding, like tectonic plates shifting. Bold. Foolish, but bold. The presence drew closer. Hadrian could feel its breath now, hot and ancient. The master commanded me to kill. I have killed. I will kill again. This is my purpose. Your purpose was to protect this school. Slytherin created you as a guardian, not an assassin. Protection through elimination. The impure defile these halls. The master is right to purge them. The master is a fragment of a dead man. A ghost pretending to be a god. Hadrian's voice hardened. I have seen real gods. I have been trained by one. Whatever riddles shade believes itself to be, it is nothing compared to what I've faced. The basilisk's presence seemed to pulse with something like interest. You do not fear me. That I respect your power. But fear requires the belief that I might lose. Hadrian finally raised his eyes, not to meet the basilisk's gaze directly, but to study the massive shadow that filled the tunnel ahead. I'm not here to fight you. Not unless you force me to. Then why come, to offer an alternative? Hadrian took a careful step forward. The diary is destroying its vessel. The girl it possesses will die soon, and when she does, the master will have no anchor. No way to continue commanding you. You'll be alone again. Sleeping in the dark. Waiting for another speaker who may never come. The basilisk said nothing, but the quality of its silence had changed. Work with me instead. I can speak to you, command you, give you purpose. The master offers nothing but destruction, a brief rampage followed by centuries of solitude. I offer something better. What could you offer the king of serpents? A world to reshape. Hadrian's voice carried absolute conviction. I'm going to burn the old order down and build something new in its place. Creatures like you, ancient, powerful, misunderstood, you deserve more than to be weapons for small men with smaller ambitions. Help me, and when I win, you'll have a place in what comes after." The basilisk was quiet for a long moment. "The master will not release me easily, the master is about to have bigger problems." Hadrian smiled in the darkness. "I know what he is. What he's hidden. Every anchor he's created, every piece of his soul he's scattered across the world. I can find them. Destroy them. End him permanently, and if you fail, then I die, and you wait for the next speaker. Nothing changes for you." Hadrian spread his hands. "But if I succeed? If I actually win? Then you've backed the right side from the beginning. And that's a story worth telling." The silence stretched. Hadrian could feel the basilisk's ancient mind working through the implications, weighing options that had never existed before. "The master is in the chamber," the serpent said finally. "Through the doors ahead. He is nearly complete." The girl fades. "Soon he will be solid. Soon he will command without needing ink and paper, then I need to move fast." Hadrian started forward. "Will you let me pass?" "I will, observe." The basilisk's presence withdrew slightly, making room in the tunnel. "Prove yourself against the master. If you triumph, we will speak again." That it wasn't alliance. Not yet. But it was opportunity. Hadrian walked toward the doors at the end of the tunnel. The Chamber of Secrets was beautiful, in a terrible way. Vast columns carved with serpents rose toward a ceiling lost in darkness. Water covered the floor in a thin sheet, reflecting the green-tinged light that had no visible source. At the far end, an enormous stone face dominated the wall, Salazar Slytherin himself, immortalized in granite, and at the base of that statue, Ginny Weasley lay motionless, the black diary clutched against her chest. A boy stood beside her. He was perhaps 16, handsome in a cold way, with dark hair and darker eyes. His robes were out of fashion by half a century. His smile was sharp enough to cut. "Harry Potter." Tom Riddle's voice carried perfectly across the cavernous space. "I wondered when you'd find your way here." "Tom." Hadrian walked forward without hurrying, footsteps sending ripples through the shallow water. "You look almost solid. Nearly there. Another hour, perhaps 2, and I'll be fully corporeal again. Poor Ginny has been so generous with her life force." Riddle gestured to the unconscious girl. "She poured out her heart to me. All her secrets, all her dreams, all her fears. Especially her fears about the famous Harry Potter, whether he'd ever notice her, whether she'd ever be worthy. And you used that." "Of course I used it. That's what power is for." Riddle's eyes glittered with something inhuman. "You know something about power, don't you? The little girl mentioned you in her writings. Said you weren't what she expected. Said you were dangerous." "Did she?" "She did. Which made me curious." Riddle began to circle, and Hadrian matched his movement, keeping the distance between them constant. "Harry Potter, the boy who lived. The infant who somehow destroyed the greatest Dark Lord in history. For years, I wondered how. What could a baby possibly have that Voldemort didn't? Love, according to Dumbledore." Riddle laughed. "Yes, the old fool would say that. But we both know love is just a word people use to prettify obsession." He stopped circling. "No, there's something else. Something in you that shouldn't exist. I can feel it, a wrongness, a displacement. You don't belong here, Harry Potter. Not really. Neither do you. True enough. I'm a memory made flesh, reaching back across 50 years to complete what the original Tom Riddle began." Riddle's smile widened. "But I will belong. Once I have a body again, once I reclaim my full power, I'll finish what I started. The purification of the magical world. The destruction of everything that dilutes our superior blood. You're half-blood yourself. A weakness of origin, corrected through will." Riddle didn't seem bothered by the observation. "My filthy Muggle father's contribution ends with his name. The rest, the magic, the ambition, the greatness, that comes from Slytherin's line. From the power that should have been mine by right. Should have been. Wasn't. Hadrian smiled. How does it feel, Tom? Knowing you failed? Knowing that for all your power, all your planning, you were beaten by a baby? Riddle's expression flickered. A temporary setback. Is that what you call it? Because from where I'm standing, you're a diary haunting a teenage girl. Not exactly the immortal god king you imagined becoming. This is merely a step. A foundation. Riddle's voice had hardened. Once I'm fully restored, I'll find the main body. The true Voldemort. We'll merge, combine our experiences and powers, become something greater than either could be alone. The main body is a spirit possessing people to survive. Not much of a merger there. You know more than you should. Riddle's eyes narrowed. Who told you? Dumbledore? That meddling fool has always seen too much. Let's just say I have sources. Hadrian stopped walking. The distance between them was perhaps 30 feet, close enough for spell work, far enough for maneuvering. Here's what's going to happen, Tom. You're going to release Ginny. You're going to let me destroy that diary. And then you're going to go back to being a bad memory. Riddle stared at him. Then he laughed, a genuine, delighted laugh. Oh, you're wonderful. Absolutely wonderful. Such confidence. Such fire. He spread his arms. Very well, Harry Potter. Let's see what you can do. Salazar's heir commands the serpent, destroy this intruder. The statue's mouth opened, Hadrian was already moving, the basilisk emerged like a flood, massive coils pouring from the carved face, fangs longer than swords gleaming in the green light. Its eyes found Hadrian, and stopped that we spoke, Hadrian said calmly, not breaking stride. I asked you to observe, the basilisk hesitated. Its massive head swung between Riddle and Hadrian, clearly conflicted. What are you doing? Riddle's voice pitched upward. I command you. Kill him. The master commands. But the speaker asked. The basilisk's voice was troubled. You said you would prove yourself against the master. Prove. Riddle's expression twisted with rage. You've corrupted my serpent. How? I talked to it. Hadrian drew his wand, not because he needed it, but because it would focus his magic more precisely. Turns out your weapon has opinions about being used. Maybe try treating ancient creatures with respect sometime. I'll kill you myself. Riddle raised Ginny's wand, somehow he'd taken it, and green light gathered at its tip, Avada Kedavra, Hadrian dove sideways as death screamed past. He came up casting, not the killing curse but something Madara had taught him, a modified reductor curse designed to fragment rather than demolish. The spell caught Riddle in the shoulder. His form flickered, not quite solid enough to sustain real damage but not incorporeal enough to ignore it entirely. Pain, Riddle gasped. I can actually feel pain again. How delightful. He retaliated with a chain of curses, cruciatus, blasting hex, something dark and purple that Hadrian didn't recognize. Each one was fast, precise, obviously cast by someone who had spent decades mastering combat magic. Hadrian dodged, blocked, deflected. Madara's training kept him alive where raw magical power might have failed. He was faster than Riddle expected, more unpredictable, refusing to engage in the straightforward duel the memory wanted. Instead, he fought dirty. Fire erupted from his left hand, not wand-channeled magic but raw elemental manipulation, the technique Madara had drilled into him until it was instinct. The flames roared toward Riddle, who shielded but had to retreat. Hadrian pressed forward. Water rose from the floor at his command, not to attack but to obscure, fog filling the chamber, breaking sight lines, creating chaos. Riddle snarled something and the fog cleared with a wave of his wand. But Hadrian was already elsewhere, circling, approaching the real target. The diary.it lay beside Ginny's body, black leather gleaming wetly. The source of Riddle's power. The anchor keeping him tethered to this plane, Hadrian grabbed it. No. Riddle's composure shattered. Release that immediately. Instead, Hadrian reached into his pocket and pulled out a fang. The basilisk had shed it centuries ago, one of hundreds littering the tunnel outside, too mundane for anyone to notice. But basilisk venom destroyed almost anything. Including, Hadrian suspected, fragments of soul. Goodbye, Tom. He drove the fang through the diary's cover. Riddle screamed. The sound wasn't human. It was something older, darker, a soul being ripped apart and knowing it. Black liquid, ink and blood and something worse, sprayed from the diary's wound. Riddle's form flickered, destabilized, began to collapse in on itself. This isn't, you can't, I am Lord Voldemort. You were a memory. Hadrian twisted the fang. Now you're nothing. Riddle dissolved, the light went out of his eyes first, then his face, then his entire form. In seconds, nothing remained but fading echoes and the ruined diary in Hadrian's hands. Silence fell over the Chamber of Secrets. Then, softly, impressive, the basilisk slithered forward, its massive head lowering to Hadrian's level. This close, the serpent was even more enormous than he'd realized, ancient beyond measure, powerful beyond comprehension. You destroyed the master that I did, then, we talk. The basilisk's voice held something like hope. You spoke of purpose. Of a world reshaped. You spoke of a place for creatures like me that I did, and I meant it. Hadrian met the serpent's gaze, carefully, through its reflection in the water. But that future requires patience. You need to remain hidden for now. Sleep in the chamber. When I call, you'll know. How long? Years, perhaps. Maybe less if things move quickly. Hadrian smiled. But when the time comes, King of Serpents, you'll have a war worth fighting, the basilisk considered. Then, slowly, it bowed its massive head. That I will wait. Call when you are ready, speaker. I will answer. That it retreated into the statue's mouth, coils sliding into darkness. The stone face closed behind it. Hadrian turned to Ginny. She was breathing, barely, but breathing. The diary's destruction had stopped the drain on her life force, but she was desperately weak. She needed medical attention immediately. That he gathered her in his arms and began the long climb back to the surface. The hospital wing was quiet except for Ginny's breathing. Hadrian had delivered her directly to Madame Pomfrey, claiming he'd found her collapsed in a corridor. The matron had asked no questions. Medical professionals rarely did when lives were at stake. She'd simply worked, stabilizing the girl, forcing potions down her throat, surrounding her with monitoring spells. Ginny would live. The diary was ashes, burned thoroughly once Hadrian had retreated to privacy. No evidence remained of what had really happened in the chamber. Dumbledore would know, of course. The headmaster always knew. But proving anything was another matter entirely. You've been busy. The voice came from the shadowed corner of the room. Hadrian didn't jump. He'd sensed the presence the moment he walked in. Daphne Greengrass stepped into the light. You found the chamber. Destroyed whatever was hunting students. Saved the Weasley girl. Her ice-blue eyes studied him with new intensity. And somehow, you did it all without anyone knowing you were involved. Ginny was sleepwalking. She wandered into the wrong place at the wrong time. I happened to find her before anything worse happened. Hadrian kept his voice bland. That's the story. It's a terrible story. No one will believe it. Everyone will believe it. Because it's simple, and it protects people from uncomfortable truths, and Dumbledore will support it because it suits his purposes. Hadrian smiled thinly. The wizarding world loves comfortable lies. Daphne was quiet for a moment. I found the diary. Like you asked. Tracked it to her. I know. Your information was useful. But you didn't need me to actually do anything. You just wanted to see if I could. I wanted to see if you could be trusted with dangerous knowledge. If you could follow instructions precisely. If you could resist the temptation to involve yourself when patience was the better option. Hadrian met her eyes. You passed. All of it. So now what? Now we talk about partnership. Hadrian stood, moving toward the door. Not here. Not tonight. But soon. I'll send word. Hadrian. She'd never used his real name before. What you did tonight, facing whatever was down there, alone, without backup, that was either incredibly brave or incredibly stupid. Both, probably. He paused at the threshold. Get some sleep, Daphne. The year's almost over. Next year, things get interesting. He vanished into the corridor, leaving her alone with the unconscious Weasley girl and 1,000 questions. The end-of-year feast was subdued, the attacks had stopped, but no one knew why. The official explanation, that the danger had passed, that precautions had been effective, that students should focus on their studies, satisfied no one. Rumors swirled. Theories multiplied. Harry Potter's name came up more often than he would have liked. Hadrian sat with Ron and Hermione, eating roast chicken, pretending everything was normal. Still can't believe they're not telling us anything, Ron grumbled. People got petrified. Mrs. Norris, Colin, Justin, nearly headless Nick, and they just expect us to move on. The mandrakes are almost ready, Hermione offered. Professor Sprout said another few weeks and they can brew the restorative. Everyone who was petrified will be fine. That's not the point. The point is something was hunting students and nobody bothered to explain what. Some things are better left unexplained. Hadrian's voice was mild. Would it really help to know that a 1,000-year-old monster was living under the school this whole time? Ron went pale. What now? Hypothetically. Hadrian smiled innocently. I'm just saying, sometimes ignorance actually is bliss. The feast continued. Dumbledore made his usual end-of-year speech, congratulating Gryffindor on winning the House Cup, thanking the staff for their dedication, wishing everyone a safe and restful summer. His eyes found Hadrian's during the applause. The old man smiled, a knowing smile, the kind that said I see you, I understand, and we will reckon with this eventually. Hadrian smiled back, projecting harmless innocence. The game continued. Platform 9 3/4 was chaos again, but this time Hadrian welcomed it. The year had been exhausting. Maintaining the mask, building alliances, hunting the basilisk, destroying Riddle's Horcrux, each task had demanded something from him, and by June he was running on fumes, but he'd accomplished what he set out to do. The chamber was secured. Ginny was saved. Daphne was recruited. The groundwork was laid for next year's expansion. Same time next year? Ron asked as they prepared to part ways, grinning despite the chaos around them. Wouldn't miss it. Hadrian clasped his friend's hand. Give Ginny my best. Tell her it gets easier. Ron's expression flickered with something complicated. She doesn't remember much about what happened. Just bits and pieces. Nightmares, mostly. That's probably for the best. Hermione hugged him tightly, whispering in his ear, I'll continue the research. The thing you mentioned, the pieces, I think I'm close to understanding. Be careful. That knowledge is dangerous. I know. She pulled back, eyes fierce. That's why I need to understand it. The crowd separated them. Hadrian collected his trunk, made his way toward the barrier, stepped through into the mundane world. Madara was waiting. The legendary shinobi looked out of place among the Muggle commuters, too still, too watchful, too obviously predatory. But he smiled when he saw Hadrian, and the expression transformed his face into something almost human. Welcome back. Good to be back. Hadrian fell into step beside his father, letting the familiar presence wash away months of accumulated tension. We have a lot to discuss. The Horcrux. Destroyed. Along with the creature guarding it, or rather, repurposed. The basilisk has agreed to serve me when the time comes. Madara's eyebrows rose. You recruited a legendary serpent. It was tired of being a weapon. I offered it something better. Hadrian smiled. Sound familiar? Impudent child. But Madara's voice was warm. What else? Dumbledore knows more than I'd like. Snape is playing his own game, but we might be able to use that. The Greengrass girl passed her test, she'll be useful going forward. And Voldemort's shade is still out there, somewhere, gathering strength for another attempt. Then we continue preparing. Madara's hand settled on Hadrian's shoulder as they walked toward the station exit. The war is coming faster than I anticipated. We must be ready. We will be. The London street swallowed them up, two figures disappearing into the crowd, planning revolution. Summer had begun, the third year awaited. Chapter 4, First Blood. Voldemort makes his move early, drawn by the disturbance in the prophecy's flow. The confrontation isn't in a graveyard. It's in Hogsmeade, in broad daylight, because Voldemort wants the world to see him kill the boy who lived. What the world sees instead is a 13-year-old standing alone against the Dark Lord, and laughing. Madara taught him to fight gods. Voldemort is not a god. He's a very talented amateur. The battle is devastating. Voldemort survives, barely, and realizes he needs to become something more. The Otsutsuki seal cracks. Chapter 5, The Politics of Power. The ICW convenes. The Ministry fractures. Half the world wants Hadrian as their weapon, the other half wants him dead. Dumbledore attempts to manipulate Hadrian, for the greater good. Madara intervenes, not with violence, but with words, dismantling Dumbledore's philosophy in front of the Wizengamot. Meanwhile, Hadrian navigates Hogwarts politics, gains genuine allies, Luna, Neville, surprisingly Daphne Greengrass, and discovers his mother's legacy. Lily Potter was not a Muggleborn. She was something else entirely. The truth about the Otsutsuki begins to surface. Chapter 6, Gods and Monsters. Voldemort returns, transformed by the entity beneath the earth, wielding power that finally threatens even Madara. The Battle of Hogwarts happens 2 years early. Students fight. Teachers die. Hadrian watches friends fall and has to choose between Madara's philosophy, sacrifice the few to save the many, and his own emerging, no one gets left behind. He chooses a third option, becomes so powerful that he doesn't have to sacrifice anyone. He awakens the Mangekyo Sharingan watching Madara take a killing blow meant for him. The Susanoo manifests for the first time. Voldemort flees. Chapter 7, The Uchiha legacy. Madara is dying. The wound was cursed, something even his regeneration can't fix. He has days. Maybe a week. The entity beneath Hogwarts fully awakens, an Otsutsuki parasite that's been feeding on magical Britain for a millennium, and Voldemort has become its vessel. The final battle isn't about good versus evil. It's about a son fighting to protect his father long enough for Madara to see him win. The wizarding world watches an Uchiha stand alone against an eldritch god. They see him fall. They see him rise. When the dust settles, Voldemort is gone, truly gone, and the entity is sealed using a combination of Uchiha techniques and Lily's forgotten heritage. Madara dies at sunrise, watching Hadrian, his son, standing tall. The last thing he says isn't a lesson. It isn't philosophy. It's just, you did good, boy. You did good. Romance, slow burn. Hadrian's romantic arc develops organically with Daphne Greengrass, two people who understand masks, family legacy, and the loneliness of being useful instead of wanted. No declarations. No grand gestures. Just two sharp people slowly lowering their guards, one sarcastic comment at a time. Tone brutal but not grimdark. Emotional but not melodramatic. The action hits hard, the quiet moments hit harder, and underneath it all is the simple question, what does it mean to be someone's family? Ready to begin Chapter 1 on your command. Now.